And we're live.
Hi, everybody. A very warm welcome to everyone on this web summit today. Survive the lockdown and come out fighting. My name is Helen Roberts. I'm the co-founder and CEO of CPG Executive Consulting and Startup Richmond. And on here with me is Bhairav Patel, co-founder of Aspen Ventures, and Rajan Amin, the founder of Coversure, who you'll hear from shortly. Now, guys, you all know we're going through an unprecedented crisis right now. And we all know how tough it is. We're all entrepreneurs too. And, it's something that we've never experienced to this degree ever before. So a group of us got together to put on this event today to do our bit, to do our best to help you and small businesses through this crisis. We genuinely hope that everyone on this call is doing okay and you and your families continue to stay safe and to stay healthy. So thank you for being here. We know time is of the essence. So over the next few hours, we're going to do our utmost to help you unlock these key challenges across your business. It's a jam-packed event, and you'll hear from our team of experts who are ready to do their best to help you through this difficult time. Guys, it's never been more important than now for us to stick together, to work with each other, and to help everyone through this difficult time. We all know business is not an easy sport. And if we work together, it's more likely that we'll all prosper. So let's jump in that boat together. Let's pull in the same direction, and we can go much further, faster. So look, guys, here's the thing. In every crisis, there also comes opportunities. And there's lots of opportunities for you in your business right now. We need to be ready. Okay, so I'm going to hand over shortly to Bhairav, who will be guiding us all through this event to make sure it runs smoothly and we are running on time as well. I want each and every one of you to get every ounce massive value out of this for you and for your business. So let's make the next few hours count. Bhairav, over to you.
Hi guys. So my name is Bhairav Patel, as Helen mentioned, and I'll be moderating the discussions here, the virtual summit. What we want to try and do is leave as much time for Q&A as possible. What we've done is that we've created a chat. So there's a chat. I can see some chats coming in, and we've kept it private for now. So if you've got any questions, then feel free to post them in the chat. And what we can do is towards the end of each chat, each conversation, we can then get those questions answered. So the event, I've got a question of how long the event is. So we're running the event, a number of speakers over 15 minutes. We're aiming to end at 4:30. You can see the lineup within the actual meeting, the registration agenda, and you can see who's speaking at what point in time. So you're happy to dip in and out as and when you feel. So let me hand over to Rajan Amin from Coversure so that he can talk to you about insurance.
Hi, thank you to Bav and everybody. We're a local Croydon business. We've been trading for 19 years. And we've been in Croydon 5 years. We have a team of 4. We're all working from home. So I'm one of the 5 million small micro businesses that is going through the same challenges as the 270 people that have very kindly registered to attend this little webinar. So I want to share maybe 2 things today. One, as a independent insurance broker, good practice for you as business owners, what to do, and also from a personal point of view, as a small business, trying to get to grips with what's happening and what we're doing as a small business to make sure that we continue to do what we do, but also stand out from the crowd. And also this is an opportunity, I believe, to really stand out from why clients should be dealing with maybe people of companies our size locally rather than looking for the big boys. So if you've got any questions, please keep them coming in, and I'm sure Bag will point them out to me. But a couple of tips that you may want to write down, or my details will be available later. But some really sensible things to do now. I can see some messages saying that you're in lockdown or you're working from home. So the number one thing, obviously, is if you work from an office or you have a retail space or a commercial space, make sure you have secured that properly. That is absolutely paramount and really important. If you're left in a hurry, think about going back if it's safe and getting that premises secure. That is really important. We must do that. Number 2, inform your insurer if you haven't already. So if you're dealing directly with an insurance company, pick up the phone and speak to them or email them, or through your broker, whichever channel that you are using. But let them know what's happening and what is happening at your business premises. Number 3, really important, a lot of our clients are not aware. If you have handed over computer items such as laptops or phones or desktops or other machinery or items that the company owns over to your teams and your staff to take to their own personal homes, make sure that is covered under your insurance policy. Because if it gets damaged, stolen, or whatever happens to it, if it's owned by your company, it should be insured under your business insurance. So make sure you told your insurer. Number 4, make sure your team and your employers tell their insurance companies that they're now working from home, especially if they've bought, for example, your desktop or some sort of equipment home or some sort of item, or maybe even some stock or some samples. Or, they may have bought something into the house that normally would stay in the office or at the work premises. Make sure they inform their insurer of what they're doing. These 2 things are really critical. Next one is, if you own an office or you have a business space like a retail unit or a premises, whether you are the freehold owner or whether you are leasing it as a tenant, check with your insurer or your landlord what the unoccupancy terms are. Now, what that means is that if a business stops trading, which means for a consecutive number of days, it could be 21 days, it could be 30 days, check what your policy says. If there is no trading happening at that premises, you must inform the insurer. Now, some insurers have already come out and said during this crisis right now, they're going to extend that period of number of days before you need to notify them. So there's been some really good insurers that have come out already saying, don't panic about that, but we're going to extend the normal time in which you need to notify us. So think about that, but make sure you know what your limit is and at what point, if this continues for us to stay home for a longer period, at what point you will need to let your insurer know that your premises is unoccupied. So that is a really important one. Next one is about payments. At the moment, we're trying to help our clients who pay us in maybe, they pay us 50-50 or they pay us over 3 payments. Obviously, the number 1 thing we're getting right now is, Rajan, I don't have the funds, what do I do? Ask your insurer, ask your broker for payment options. Can you go into a direct debit? Now, some insurance companies, whether you go through a broker or directly to them, may offer you interest-free direct debit. So is that over 10 months or 12 months? Is it over 3 months, 6 months? So check all your payment options and see how you can pay your premiums. Think long and hard before you think about lapsing a policy or canceling, and make sure you speak to a professional before you make a decision like that. So check your payment options and see what you can do and what you're allowed to do. Another thing that has hit close to home to Coversure, our group, is be aware of cybersecurity. Using home internet connections obviously opens up a whole array of risks that people face, from letting people into your websites or your Outlook portals or into your emails. So make sure that the machines that your teams are using or the computers have the up-to-date antivirus. Make sure they're checked, but make sure your teams are aware that at home we're a little bit more relaxed. And we may click on that button or click on that email that we don't normally in the office. We're a little bit more astute and a bit more aware. Make sure they keep that diligence at a high level at all times, because unfortunately, cyber attacks are on the increase. So be really careful and warn your teams out there if they're working remotely to be really careful, because people are already falling victim to this sort of thing. So be really careful of that. I know a lot of people over the last 3 weeks have been asking about, does my business policy cover me for being forced to close down or going into lockdown and having to shut my business down for business interruption? That is the number 1 question we have been asked for the last 3 weeks. Even today, I've had a call on that. All I can say to you on that is every policy is different, and you are going to need to speak to your insurer directly or your broker and ask what the cover is and if there is any cover on there. And if there is, how does it work? Because each policy is like a fingerprint. It is different, so you'll need to check on that individually. And before I take some questions, I can see some coming in. The last thing I'll say to you is remember that whether you've got a simple public liability policy or a full-blown commercial combined covering your property, your business, your stock, and goods in transit and everything, remember your insurance policy is there for more than just what the situation we find ourselves in right now. It provides cover against a whole plethora of different insurance risks. So make sure you understand what it covers, and make sure you take a long breath and a deep breath before you make any decision about stopping it or lapsing it. So that's my little bit from the insurance broker side. Bhairav, I don't know if you've got any questions that you want to read off to me.
Hi, so if please feel free to add them to the chat. I've not seen any coming through specifically on insurance, but I have one around business resilience.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk today about business resilience insurance, business continuity insurance. Obviously, it's a little bit late in the day for that at this point in time, but can you talk a little bit around that and what kind of things did that cover?
Yeah, I mean, within all even package policies, which is 99% of the sort of business we write, package policies, as the term suggests, is you buy a policy that has lots of standard covers built in there. So business continuity or business resilience could be things like denial of access to your premises. So if you can't get to your business premises, you can't trade. Now that could be because the water main is busted outside your front door. It could be that there's been, some sort of, unfortunately, a murder or something near the scene, and the police have cornered off the area for 7 days or something. There could be a number of reasons under denial of access to your business premises. So there are all these little covers are built into standard packages. And depending on the complexity of the insurance you bought, you could have things like, product recall. You could have, your supplier has been, had an electrical fault, which means they can't manufacture anymore, which means it's impacting your business. I mean, there's so many variations. Hence why I said you need to check your policy wording, who you insure with, what is your policy.
So we've got a couple of questions here. First from Supriya. Which insurance cover? What insurance covers artwork that's been rented to businesses that are closed during the pandemic? Do you have any kind of specific?
Well, that would be under two things. In fact, we have some clients who have some very expensive artwork in their offices, either as a personal collection or artists have lent it to them. So what happens in cases like that? What we've done is we've informed our insurer that our client is holding this piece of art. If it's their own, that it's in their own personal name. If it's been lent to them by an artist, then the value of it. And we insure it under the office policy. So it's insured under and it's known as goods in trust. So that we're taking that piece of art from you, that painting or whatever it may be, and we're holding it in trust and we're displaying it in our office. So if something happens to it while it's in our trust, we need to insure it. So it depends on what basis that piece of art has been given over to the.
So another question coming in from Murray. If your policy is up for renewal, are you best staying with the same insurer? Do they have the responsibility to cover you during this period? So if you are in the insurance and you're in renewal period now, which is a difficult time.
It depends on what you mean by are you covered. So if you, for example, are one of the few lucky ones that has coronavirus covered under your business policy and they're going to accept a claim on it, it may be something you may wish to consider. It shouldn't stop you doing all the normal checks that you do about maybe if you want to make sure that, now is a really good time to go through your policy, go through your proposal form, go through the covers you've got, what information you've given to the insurer to make sure it's accurate and it's correct. So you can, if you wish to, you want to take an alternative quote, you're more than welcome, and obviously whoever's giving you advice will point out to you what is covered and what is not covered.
So one of the last questions, is it wise to reduce shareholder insurance that might be paid out on the event of death to buy back business from a shareholder?
That is something I can't advise on because that's a financial product where we provide assurance, which is insurance only. So it's something you would have to go back to. It's like key man cover or shareholder protection cover. It's cover you buy where the value of those shares or the value of that key person is determined between you, your accountant, and you put a price on it. That's not something we can advise on. But it's a very good question.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Rajan. So, Rajan, if people want to get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Well, I'm sure you can put up, but the best thing to do is if you just simply Google Coversure Croydon, which is COV for Victor, ERSURE, Coversure, one word, Croydon. You'll find us on there. Our website's on there. Thank you so much, Bhav. It's been really interesting, and I hope what we've said has added some value.
Great. And also, if you, I see Lina's just shared the link for the schedule. You'll be able to see Rajan's photo and the link there, and so he can you can contact him through the website that he's that's.
Can I just end with one thing? If I've got 30 seconds, one way we are making ourselves different is we are picking up the phone to every client we have systematically. We've got just over 900 clients. And we have made it our mantra since last week to try and call every single one of them. And that is making us stand out from the crowd. You've got huge insurance companies right now telling their customers saying, don't call us. We can't take the incoming flow. Stand out from the crowd, make yourself small and make yourself personal and really make your business shine. Thanks again.
So now Rajan is signing off. We're going to have Lina Gantar coming on from Nuuk Digital. So Lina, you just turn on your mic and cam. All right. So Lina's going to be talking about digital marketing, cost-effective ways of doing digital marketing during this period. Again, if you've got any questions, please add them through the chat. I'll collect them at the end, and we can have a discussion. So Lina, over to you.
Yeah. So hi everybody. I'll share my screen, which means I won't see the questions as they're coming in, just so that you know. But I'm sure we'll get to all of them as we go. So let me just share the screen, get into the presentation, and get on with it because we have 15 minutes. So yeah, thank you first of all, Bhairav, for organizing this. I'm sure everybody's going to benefit from this. So my assigned topic was cost-effective ways to generate leads during uncertain times. It's a very broad topic. Again, 15 minutes is barely enough to cover a few bits. So I decided to focus on some of the data on how social media at the moment is standing, how consumer behavior online has changed, because I think that's generally important for everybody who's joined the webinar. And then focused on two specific areas for lead generation, just to kind of cover a bit of the ground. And then, you know, if anybody has questions, feel free to reach out. We at Nuuk, we do loads of online lead generation, so we can definitely help and figure out how to help you. And I'll be happy to just provide advice as part of this webinar. So to breeze through, because I think, yeah, some of these are quite important to understand what's going on. So Facebook has done quite a lot of research in the short amount of time since this pandemic erupted about how the online behavior and consumer behavior is going to change, and what are the industries shifting trends, comparing to which categories are likely to win more consumers, and on the next slide I have which categories are and industries are likely to lose in consumer spending. I'm not going to deep dive into it. Again, we don't have time, but I'm sure in the recording that Bhairav will share, or in the slides that he's going to share with all the attendees, we'll be able to kind of deep dive and see if your industry is there. But in a broader perspective, I think the biggest consumer behavior change, which we all know and we've all probably experienced, is that we're spending more time online, we're spending more time on social media. And I think that's the biggest opportunity right now, actually. Even though a lot of advertisers are cutting spend, it is a great opportunity now, because advertising space, or even organic space on social media at the moment, is definitely the most cost efficient that it's been in a while. So it's a great opportunity for anybody who can or who does do social media and does at least want to try to do it. It's a great time to look at that. So yeah, feel free to explore the graphs later, because I think they're just important to mention in line of this webinar. As well as this is, that's why, Bhairav, I didn't send you the presentation until now, because I just had a chat with our Facebook team that we work with, and they shared some really cool insights that they've seen specifically in Italy, because of course they don't have a lot of data yet, because things have just started to really evolve in the Western world. But I think the most interesting thing, and as an opportunity as well when it comes to social media at the moment, is that in Italy specifically, where the outbreak and quarantine has been one of the first in the Western world, Facebook has recorded 70% more time spent across Facebook apps. So that's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger. And so 70% more time spent comparing to the month before. And you can see the graph here for group call time as well in Italy, with just the Facebook apps, much less everything else. So again, just showing that there's huge opportunity on social media, and you can definitely use it for your advantage in generating leads. And I'm going to get right into it. And this is another thing that I just thought will be useful for you to then look back on after the webinar. Of course, not to dive into it, but it's basically an overview again from Facebook, but from McKinsey originally, about when different industries are gonna pick back up. Well, at least when it's expected that they will sort of restart back to normal. And I think that's something really good to have as well for post-webinar, to kind of look into this slide, and or when you see the webinar recording, to kind of go back and pause it and just review it. But yeah, lead generation this time, definitely, you know, Facebook, Instagram is more cost efficient at this time than it was in a really long time, and we've been doing this for the past 6 years. generating leads on social media. So there's a lot of things that you can do there that are cost efficient, especially if you're a B2B business. You know, you can generate really cost efficient leads. Again, it's a very, I guess there's some people in the audience that have tried it before, some who haven't. So I thought, you know, it's good to mention that as an opportunity regardless. As well, we've seen with the B2B clients that we have, as well as the B2C clients, that webinars, ebooks, Facebook Lives, anything that's currently an online event or asset has definitely been a better lead magnet than we've seen before. So conversion rate, engagement rates are up and high. And then there's a few sales tools, and I'm going to deep dive into one that I personally feel is really useful and that can benefit to anybody who's kind of trying to find new leads at this stage or in the next few months to get the business back up and running, and that's Ocean.io, and I'll just kind of briefly show you what they're about. Hopefully I have time. So yeah, so when it comes to Facebook lead gen, at the moment that's doing really well. This is an example of one of our clients. They're going to be running a webinar for charities, and it's super easy to fill up your pipeline of clients and then start converting them. Even if they might not convert now, it's great to generate relevant webinars for your target audience, and whether that's B2C or B2B, get them in the pipeline so that then you can convert them when things get back to normal, so that when they restart their business and when they go back to BAU, business as usual, that you can just reach back out and be top of mind. And I think, you know, Facebook, for example, this is a lead gen example how Facebook forms look. It literally doesn't take much to set this up, and you can get important data, you can generate leads, and you know, we see cost per leads at the moment, even in B2C sector, being maybe like $1 to $2, and in B2B sector being $10, even less than $10 for people to register. And you know, if you then can convert that lead at a business service type of cost, you can definitely bring back the value of money. And you know, for maybe £100, you could get 10, 15 potential leads in that you could then potentially convert in a much bigger revenue volume, for example. Another really good tool to do it is the ads that click to Messenger, and you can do that with WhatsApp as well. I don't know how many of you run your own WhatsApp groups, but you could, for example, create a WhatsApp broadcast link and do a Facebook ad or a sponsored post that goes out to very relevant people in your industry, and get people and start conversations with them immediately, meaning that you don't need to just have a lead and email them, but you can have, I don't know how well you see this, but I'm sure you've seen those on social media. Send us a message, you know, whether you're a consulting business, whether you're a product, or you just want to help clients, or you want to start conversations. This is a very easy way to get people in your pipeline, to get connected with them directly, help them potentially, you know, in this time you can have a little campaign, you know, with £100, you can reach definitely a few thousand people in the UK. And that means that you can start really valuable conversations that, again, if your business needs to, you know, you will be there for them in this stage, and then you're much more likely to convert them into a regular business maybe later on. And there's many different strategies to use this from. Again, it can be people that then click from those posts and send you a message in Messenger, or you can set it up so that they send you a message in the WhatsApp. But I think at this stage, especially for B2B businesses, you know, you can use this to your advantage, you know, offer free support or free quick chat if people need any advice, and you're going to stay connected with them, you know, for the long run. And thus, when all of this is over, hopefully soon, you can then start potentially considering them as clients if you don't start as a client. So those are a few Facebook social media options that I wanted to focus on, just so that you know they're there. And yeah, feel free, I'll share my email later, to email me, and I'll be happy to elaborate more on it and give more examples if interested. And then Ocean.io, I don't know if it's very famous yet in the UK or if you guys are familiar, but I think at this stage, this is probably the most cost-efficient way to get 25 free leads. And they advertise really well. And basically they have a landing page where you put in a domain. And I've done an example with Bhairav's Atom Ventures website that I'm going to show just after this. And basically what they do is, if you compare how on LinkedIn you search for potential clients through, you know, search terms like what the size of company, where the company is located, where the person has studied, or what the job title is, you know, you can qualify it by different terms and then find leads as in people. But Ocean.io focuses on just finding businesses whose websites are more or less exactly the same as the example you give in. So for example, you would put in a domain, and I would definitely advise, again, if you have clients, whether they're business clients, so B2B, or whether they're B2C, if you have clients that have not impacted, this would be a great example. So you choose a client, for example, that has not been impacted by this situation because they're still doing well. So it means they're in an industry or in the space that has not been very impacted. You put their domain into this field, and Ocean.io will generate and find very, very similar companies in terms of size, in terms of what they do, and in terms of their general service or product offering, and it will give you a list of them, and the list will look a bit like this. So basically I used Atom Ventures just in terms of this webinar to kind of show what the result of this search, for example, would be. And they take Atom's website and compare it to everything that's on the web, and then give you a snapshot of potential other businesses that are very similar. So basically that means that they have similar services on their website, that they talk about similar industries, and they talk about similar products or services that they offer. You can see the country they're in, you can see the domain, and kind of double check if they do feel like they're the right lead, and you can even see comparison of the size of the business. And plus you can get contact details directly because they source it as well from what's available online, and you can actually get direct contacts from these leads and get in touch and see, you know, if for example Atom wouldn't be impacted by COVID-19, which I hope it's not, but if they're not impacted, then it's high chance that all of this very, very similar businesses are also not impacted. So if you're looking for a new client or a new business, and again, we have a lot of consumer electronics clients, and this works as well for B2B businesses as it does for B2C, and we've tried it many times. So you can find these clients, get in touch with them through the contact details that you get from the platform, as well as you can see, you know, the company's social media, what they do, what they're up to. And I think this is like a super useful tool at this stage to use. And again, it's a tool that you pay, but they have this sort of onboarding process so that you can see how great it is, where you get 25 free leads. So yeah, if you're in B2B space, 25 leads, you must know that that's a very valuable asset to get at any stage of your business. So yeah, wanted to share that with you. And if you have questions on in those areas, again, I have to keep it to 15 minutes. Feel free to ask anything, really. I'm always happy to chat. So I'll stop my screen sharing now, just so that I can see questions and Bhairav, but I think I kept to the 15 minutes. I can't hear you, Bhairav.
So there's one question. What is the cost of Ocean.io?
Sorry?
The cost of Ocean.io.
So the 25 leads is their free sort of demo option, so that you can just try it out. So that's totally free. I think pricing is very reasonable. It's something like 50 to 70 a month to use the platform, and you can just browse unlimited. You can actually even browse by keywords, for example, but I find it most efficient if you know what you're looking for from a domain, for example. Then you just put in the domain and you don't need to figure out the keywords, so they find very similar businesses to that.
Great. So there's a question from Spryer here asking, how do you test a B2C offering by not confusing existing B2B offerings? I'm not sure if that's a question for you or maybe for Nigel a little bit later on as a virtual CMO. But I guess the issue here is that obviously they've got a B2B base at the moment and then want to test out to a B2C base. Maybe there's mixed messaging going on.
I guess maybe, yeah. So I'm looking at the other questions. I don't think this one, I don't exactly understand what it would be in the context of lead generation, I guess.
So maybe we could go on to the next one, which is how does Ocean.io compare with the LinkedIn Sales Navigator?
Yeah, We have compared, and definitely for us personally, it makes it much easier to find exactly the same lead. So like in my example, we've worked with Sphero for a really long time. So Sphero is the robotics STEM product for kids. And instead of searching for, on LinkedIn Navigator, we would have to search for hardware companies in robotics based in Utah with 100 employees and then search for CMOs. We would get so many examples, whereas in the Ocean.io, we basically get exact same companies, and then we look at who to contact at that company directly from the contacts that they have. So we would get 25 STEM robotics websites that do exactly the same thing, that have a similar structure of the business, and then we can contact them and say, look, we work with Sphero. You're more or less the same company. You should probably have a chat with us because we've done some good stuff for them. So it's going around a different circle, I guess, to get to the client rather than searching for the right person.
So we'll take one more question. Do you need a Facebook business page to use Facebook lead generation?
Yes. You don't need a business page, any page, but yeah, you would need to set up some sort of a page. It doesn't take long to set up a page. It's a very maybe 5-10 minutes process for the basic stuff that you need. But yeah, you would need a page, but you can set up a page at any time.
All right, Lina, thanks for that. How do people get in contact with you if they need to contact you?
Yeah, so my email is Lina I'll put it here if anybody wants to get in touch about more. But yeah, I'm sure in the recording it's in the presentation as well. So
perfect. All right, so I'm going to bring in Mike now. So Mike is going to moderate my my little 15 minutes. Where are you, Mike? So Mike, are you there?
I am here. Yeah.
I can see you now.
Can you hear me?
I can do indeed.
Fantastic.
So we're bringing Mike. So for those of you listening now, I'll be talking now about managing remote teams securely and effectively. Mike will be the moderator, and then we're going to swap around as Mike will be presenting just after me.
Fantastic. I'll keep an eye out for questions as they come in.
So, okay, great. Thanks, Mike. So, just to give you a bit of a background on myself, my name is Bhairav Patel. I'm the founder of Atom CTO and Atom Ventures, and what we do is we provide virtual CTO services to businesses. So essentially what we do here is if you are a company that doesn't necessarily have a tech team or doesn't have, or has a tech team that needs some help, we can come in as experienced CTOs and help you develop a product roadmap and execute and develop on that roadmap with using the network of suppliers and vendors that we have. So there was a question just earlier on, which I want to touch on just very briefly before I get into my talk, which is around building a website during this period. Now, obviously, it's a little bit about how long is a piece of string. So if you are interested in building a website, what we can do is help you at the moment frame what exactly it is you need, what you're trying to do. And both myself and Mike are able to help within that. There are definitely companies within the network that is here that can help you for that. And you'll see my contact details at the bottom. Mike will share his later on. And if you feel free to share your details with us, we can get in touch with you and help you through that process. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is managing remote teams. And so Atom CTO, Atom Ventures are both companies that started remotely, and I've been managing remote teams for the last 15 years, and I've been working with development teams across the globe. One example is that we had teams running in New Zealand, the US, Norway, and in the UK. So we had a 24/7 development life cycle, and as you can imagine, that has its own challenges when you're trying to remote manage teams from all over the country with different cultures. Across the globe with different cultures. So what I'd like to do here is just kind of talk to you a little bit about the best practice that we've implemented over these years and how we've found working with teams remotely, and how you can just make sure that you work securely and effectively, and also optimize those processes that you'll put in place as you go along. So let me first talk about communication. So communication is something I can't really stress enough. When you're working remotely, what you really need is clear and open channels of communication. So many of you will be using things like Teams or Slack. One of the first things you need to do is to ensure that each of your business units or each of your different areas within the company have their own channels to communicate with each other, and that there's someone within your business, a senior manager, or if you as a business owner are there monitoring that. It's not necessarily to keep tabs on people, but it's just to make sure that there's no bottlenecks within the teams that are working for you, so that they can understand if there's questions, then they know that someone can get to those questions quickly. If there's any issues, you can help solve them. And it's also about keeping up people's morale, so they have a little forum in which they can chat to different chat to their teammates. We always have a daily stand-up call. So it's a 5-minute call, and it doesn't all necessarily mean it's work. It can be 50% work, 50% chat. And a lot of what people do is it's a good way of people sharing any issues that they may have, but it's also a way for you to set goals of what people need to get done. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you're going to be not only just setting goals, but also in reducing the bottlenecks, because people aren't necessarily working at the times that you normally expect them to be working. One important thing here is, like, do not over communicate. So one of the things that you can do quite quickly is you can start trying to contact people on Teams, on email, on the phone. And really what you should be doing is having one clear channel of communication, and then one other channel where you know that is more or less kind of an emergency set of communication. So for example, I work very heavily with Teams, and I know that if I need something urgently from one of my team, I will call them directly. So that they know if there's a phone call, then they should be picking that up. I know that if I put something out on Teams, it'll be picked up at the time in which those other people are working, and I know that they'll see it. But if I need something immediate, I will get that through a phone call. And what you don't want to do is overload people, especially if you've got clients that are trying to contact you through WhatsApp and email and text message. The best thing to do is try and reduce those sets of communications down, so you know where you're communicating, what you're communicating, and how the urgency of those communications. The next thing is trust. So trust and setting goal setting. Now, what you find is, a number of inexperienced managers, when people work from home, they feel they kind of lose control. So you kind of get, poor managers tend to get found out fairly quickly in this situation, simply because one of two things happens. Either they overcompensate and micromanage, or you see them pulling back and they kind of disappear. So what you really want to do is make sure your team feels that they're trusted. I think the key thing here is that people aren't necessarily going to be working in the set 9 to 5 hours. It's going to be very difficult for your kids. You've got people that you need to look after within the house, for you to be able to work those set 9 to 5 hours. So having that daily team meeting, that 5-minute call with people to ensure that these are the goals and these are the things that need to be done today, this week, this month, and also ensuring that people understand when other people are working. So for example, if you know that you've got things to be done in the morning because you look after the kids, then it's important that anyone who's dependent on you knows that you can then say, okay, we're going to set this time to talk, so that we can walk through any issues that you've got. So be aware that people aren't necessarily going to be sitting there at 9 to 5 in front of their PCs. The next thing is making sure you have company-wide meetings. So again, when you're working remotely, it can be easy to feel lonely and isolated. And what is useful, and what I found, is that every week, or maybe even 2 weeks, depending on the size of your business, what we tend to do is have a company-wide meeting where we talk about the business itself, how it's going, what new leads we may have, what new business we may have, current projects, any kind of issues that you've got that are on top of the daily stand-up. So this is more where the senior management can come in and really talk to the business and talk to the teams, and help them feel that not only are they part of a wider business, but the business hasn't gone away, it hasn't necessarily disappeared, and that they feel a sense of security that actually the job is still there, and that they are working towards something bigger. And the last thing is really having fun. So, obviously people miss the office banter, people miss the kind of, the conversations that you have within an office, and you can have that within the team, within the team's framework. You can easily set up quick chats, side chats with people, but also, try and do something fun. Try and do something fun every week. And I know there's a lot of stuff going on out there on the net at the moment. So it's very important that you maintain that fun aspect. What I'm going to talk about now is about the kind of more practical aspects. So obviously Rajan talked about this when he talked a little bit about insurance, but of course, once you've got devices, a lot of you may have bought devices for your teams and be giving them laptops, etc. What you need to do is make sure that they're secured. So you need to make sure that your IT department, or whoever it is that manages your IT devices, has secured those laptops. It may well be things like locking down USB ports, ensuring that there's up-to-date antivirus on the laptops, making sure passwords are secure. So we use tools like 1Password or LastPass to share passwords in amongst teams, so you're not actually sharing plain passwords via plain text. Because again, that is something that tends to happen when people are working from home. They tend to be a little bit more lax around security. Things like auditing. Now, I'm not saying that you should audit what your people are doing and when they're doing it, but it's more along the lines of, when are people accessing your systems? Do you know when people are actually accessing and downloading information from you? Because again, because devices are connected to your network from home, there is more opportunity for other people to actually access them. I'm not saying anything malicious will happen, but people do tend to be a little bit more relaxed at home, which goes to my next point around governance. So governance is very important when you're looking at simple things like finance, financial movements, moving money. Where you have processes which may work in the office, you'll need to make sure that those processes are even tighter when you're outside of the office. And as Rajan said, cybersecurity is essential. So there are a lot more phishing attacks going on, and you can see that in the news that there's a huge increase in cybercrime, where people are targeting individuals at their homes because they are a little bit less kind of not necessarily aware, but they may be a little bit more relaxed in the way that they're doing things. And so you need to make sure that the governance that you have along your procedures are tight, and that you're enforcing those, and that there is a trail, an audit trail that can show that you are actually enforcing those. Now, a couple of key things here that people may not understand: you may have shifted to Office 365 or G Suite over this period. One of the things, very important things to note to you guys, is that Office 365 is not backed up. And what I mean by that is that there is resilience, obviously, in Microsoft, that if one of their nodes fails, they'll have data copied to another place. But if there is a catastrophic event, then your data is not backed up. So that means your SharePoint data, your OneDrive data, your emails, that is not backed up by anyone. So if it's lost, it's lost. And there are a number of different tools out there that can help journal your emails, back up your files to the cloud. And please feel free to get in contact with us. We're trialing a number of different software that will help businesses of different sizes ensure that their data is backed up. So if there is a catastrophic event that happens, that you can restore that data. And again, with data loss prevention, what is important that, again, if you're with Office 365, there are a lot of tools built within Office 365 to help you prevent data loss. And what I mean by that is, for example, people emailing spreadsheets of employees that may need to be furloughed, et cetera, right? So that there are tools within Microsoft that allow you to do this from day one. There are some small costs in there, but really it kind of moves to the next phase of what I'm trying to talk about, which is optimizing and reviewing your procedures and processes. Because obviously now you're working remotely, a lot of the processes that you'll have had in-house will be different, and they may not actually extend out to working remotely. And you may need to realize that you may want to have additional levels of security, data classification, data loss prevention rules, all of these policies and procedures in place that you may not have had before. So it's something that you need to start looking at and understanding, okay, this is going to be a new normal. Working remotely is not going to go away now. People have had the taste of it. It'll be something that I'm sure people have asked you within your own business that this is what they want to do more of. And so now you need to look at your processes and procedures and decide on how you can optimize those. And again, when we're talking about that, you want to remove any tasks that are non-value adding, so things that don't add to your top line or reduce your bottom line, and look at things like automating low risk, high frequency tasks, and actually spending this time now to have a look at your overall procedures and processes and say, okay, are there areas within my current procedures and processes that I can actually reduce time, save costs by automating, bringing in things like CRM systems or accounting systems or whatever it is that that you can then use to reduce the amount of time spent doing manual tasks. So I've kind of whizzed through a lot there in a very short period of time. What I'll do now is I will do as Lina did and end my screen sharing to see if what questions are out there for us. I'll bring you back into the fold there, Mike.
Seen any specific questions for you there, Bhairav, but I've got one myself that I think may be relevant to a number of people. There's so many options out there in terms of communications channels and technology tools. How do you decide what's right for you or what's right for your team?
So I think, when we started, we experimented with everything. So we're kind of the early adopters, and we tried Slack when it first came out, Teams when it first came out, Yammer, pretty much every single tool you can imagine that was there, even working things in SharePoint. And I think the thing that we've settled on is that in all, they're kind of much of a muchness. Slack is great when you come in channels, but Teams has the same thing. What you've got to figure out is how are your people working? So if it's a lot of people working mobile, like on their phones, what has the best mobile app that has the one that is best user interface for you? How is your team structured? So do you need specific things like channels? So for example, Slack is great for channels. And what kind of integrations do you need? So are you looking to create something that has a lot of productivity within one space? So again, Slack is great for that because you've got integrations into things like HubSpot, you've got integrations into Outlook, et cetera, et cetera. However, when we've done that and we've tried to put everything into one place, what you found is the noise is overwhelming. And you get a lot of noise because you'll get emails coming in, you've got notifications, and everything just starts firing up. So you've got to, I think, for us, what we decided was that we wanted to strip down communication to exactly what it was, which is sharing documents and sharing information. And so Teams was great for that because it just allowed us to share documents in there and just to chat plainly. But if you feel that you need something more robust and complex, something like Slack will work quite well for you. I think the key things there really are to understand, how do your people work? How tech savvy are they? And really, what is the what is the purpose of that kind of communication? Are you doing it as to run your business out of it, or are you doing it just to have a conversation? And I think then you evaluate based on that.
Absolutely. Someone's made a really valid point there that working with local authorities and government limits your choice, because there's certain things that they either can't access because of their security protocols, or in some cases, and I've come across this, they're still running Windows 95 or something.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So a couple of questions about security, actually. You mentioned already about Office 365 and some other systems not automatically backing up. Can you recommend any specific affordable options for creating those sorts of backups?
So what we're doing is we're evaluating a couple at the moment. One is called Data Vault, which actually Mark, very well from that. And there's another product that we're looking at the moment whose name completely slips my mind. We've also used in previous projects journaling. So Symantec has a journaling aspect on email. Again, a little bit depends on what you need. So something like Data Vault can actually back up your entire Azure and your AWS platforms. So anything that you've got out there, virtual machines, can be backed up there, as well as emails, etc. So what I would suggest is have a quick, if you get in touch with me on, either on LinkedIn at Bhairav Patel or Bhairav at atomcto.com, what we can do is have a quick discussion of your needs, and we can take a look at what we've been looking at and what we've used previously, and find out what your needs are, because as you can imagine, costs do kind of escalate quite quickly if you've got lots and lots of data.
A really interesting and valid question about whether you would choose Zoom over Skype or vice versa. And if I can couple that up with someone else has asked, what's the best way to sort of cascade management? So if you've got middle managers, you do perhaps a one-to-one with each of them, but that can eat a lot of time, especially if you're doing it as regularly as a daily stand-up. One-to-ones, sort of video tools, and how would you structure that conversation to make sure it's efficient?
All right, because I realize I'm eating into your time here, but I'll try and be quick. Skype or Zoom, again, Skype has just been a bit of a nightmare over the last X number of years, and to be honest, Microsoft are moving away from Skype and putting more actual money and development behind Teams. Teams is actually not a bad thing to use if you want your one-to-ones. Zoom is great, but again, you have to download the software, and depending on your PCs, how much level of access that you've got for your employees, whether you've locked them out of admin roles and things like that, Zoom and GoToMeeting can be a little bit tricky. I know for certain accountancy firms, for example, when we've tried to have meetings with them, they've not been able to use GoToMeeting simply because you have to download and run something on the laptops. We actually use another thing called Uber Conference, which is purely web-based. And I think it can have a number of, there's a free version and a £10 or $10 a month version. It's purely web-based. You can open up in Chrome, you can share your screens, and we've had good success with that because it's a simple, cheap option to share, to obviously not only to share screens, but to have video web conferencing. So in many ways, I would avoid Skype. If you're going to look at Skype, look at Teams. Yes, it was called Uber. I saw the thing, Uber Conference. Sounds like it comes from Uber, but I don't think it does. So it's called Uber Conference. It's another one that has a funky hold music as well for you. On the senior members of the team, what I've done previously is you have obviously each team, whatever teams they are, they'll have their senior manager involved in that daily stand-up. And I would not have a daily stand-up with my senior members. No, I would have that more on a weekly basis, because you'd be setting targets and goals for those on a weekly or monthly basis, right? But you just had that communication channel. So what we would do, or what I'd normally do, is I'd have the team leads would know that they can contact me through Slack or whatever it is if they needed something, but I wouldn't do a one-on-one with them every day. It would be more of a weekly, and that would be overarching goal setting of these are the things that we need to get done. So I guess what I'll do is I'll hand over to you, and I'll come back in.
There's a couple more questions there. Just one in particular about House Party and whether that was a hoax about that being hacked. Not sure if you got any information on that. I certainly haven't. I did delete my account because I heard some first-hand reports of problems and hacks into other accounts. Other question that I thought was really interesting and relevant: how do you secure projects for outsourced teams? And I think, Bhairav, you sort of touched on that, about having those systems and processes in place to to share things like passwords, things like access to information, access to tools, but to sort of have a consistent way of managing that sort of thing. But again, if perhaps that's something that was already in place and you now feel a bit more nervous about it, being that it's more of a remote relationship, then again, it's about getting those in place now, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I'll be quick, because again, I'm eating into your time.
That's all right.
But I think that the key thing here is that when I work with teams remotely, I have LastPass for Teams, so that all of the passwords are stored in there, and you can segregate the passwords. So if you've got multiple clients, then you know that you can actually, only certain members of the team can see certain passwords and update them. So that's one thing to look at. So something like 1Password, LastPass, those are for securing passwords at least. If you've got outsourced teams that are working on code or building code for you, I would suggest that you need to make sure that if they're using Git or Bitbucket or whatever it is, you have your access to that, that you have your admin access to that as just standard, so that you know that you've got access to the code at any one point in time. Obviously, there's issues around code being on devices after you finish a project. That's where you need to make sure and go and have, ensure that the developers have wiped that, and there's proof that you can, that is wiped. Ultimately, there's also ways of keeping code in escrow. But again, if you just contact with me on Bhairav@atomcto.com, we can discuss this a little bit further.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bhairav. Is the button going to appear for me to share my... oh, there we go. I have some slides. Firstly, I thought actually I'd better just explain my facial hair to everyone. It was mentioned earlier that some people have both parenting and now teaching duties. Now, my son was working on some Spanish just yesterday, and so I ran in with newly shaved Zapata and a sombrero, which just helped make it a little bit more fun for him with his Spanish lesson anyway. So I'm keeping it to the end of the week, so I thought it would be fine to have that as a bit of fun today. Anyway, I've got now about 10 minutes, I think, Bhairav, to talk to you a little bit more about managing people, really, I suppose. So my background is the last 10 years I've been putting together pop-up teams of freelancers and independent professionals to deliver fixed cost projects for clients, mainly scale-up businesses, perhaps sort of 5 or 10-year-old businesses that are getting real traction, but they don't want to create too much fixed cost in their business. Therefore, I was actually in the corporate world for a good 10 or 15 years, pretty much doing the same thing, actually. I delivered a lot of innovation projects, and very often you had to put together teams across different departments, sometimes working with external agencies. And it's the same sort of challenges. How do you motivate people? How do you keep everyone engaged? How do you manage the information flow so that everyone knows what they're doing and is delivering their best performance? And that can be quite difficult, certainly in a corporate world where I remember having to, being told to recruit team members from what was known as the surplus pool. So you can imagine if you've been labeled surplus to requirements, you're not particularly motivated. Anyway, in terms of a frame of reference for what I want to talk about, I really wanted to talk about the Agile Manifesto. Now, Agile as a way of working is not just for technology and for coding projects and software projects. I totally believe that the Agile Manifesto can be applied to all areas of business, if not all areas of life, because it speaks to various universal and fundamental truths, really. While we're talking, I have set up some polls. So if you have time to just click onto the polls instead of the chat, I'm just going to add a couple of questions to that poll, and that may well help shape the conversation as well. Right, that is on there. So the first thing within the Agile Manifesto is very much that it's all about people. It's always about people. And especially if you're faced with a challenge at the moment where people are shifting to working from home, shifting to working remotely, and perhaps haven't had much of that experience in the past. Although the poll is telling me that so far 74, about 70% of you are saying you have worked remotely previously. But it can be a real culture shock, not just for managers, but for the individual team members. And it can be quite a scary thing, especially if the implication to some people might be, well, they won't have a job to go back to, right? So if we can just focus on the fact that it's about individuals and interactions, most importantly, rather than processes and tools, I think that's fundamentally important. And that is sort of step one in the Agile Manifesto. Now, Bhairav's obviously talked a little bit about the types of tools you can use, and these are really important. But don't forget, it is all about the people. So select those tools based on what works for everyone. Make sure that you're not overusing tools and overwhelming people with communications, and make sure that everyone has an equal say and an equal opportunity to contribute, which is why I think those daily stand-ups, which is another sort of agile method, are really helpful as well. Okay, so the second area really is about focusing on the outcomes. Now, you know, if you guys are running quite small businesses, this is probably more part of your DNA, is to focus on delivering value for your clients rather than being overly process and documentation driven. But the risk is, especially if people are no longer sat at the desk in your office and where you can just pop over and check out what's going on, you might be tempted to create, to ask people to create more documentation, more reporting. And if people feel that that isn't creating value and it's not best use of their time, then not only do you risk them not doing it at all, you risk them losing faith in the whole process, the whole activity, if they feel it's not generating value for your end clients, and that their own contributions aren't particularly valued. So again, really focus on those outcomes, and if necessary, involve your clients in that conversation so that you can short circuit the distribution of the value and the information relating to the value. Because paperwork counts for nothing on its own, right? It's always about creating something that's useful to others. I'm going to chuck in another question in the poll. So just following on from that question, do you think then perhaps that you might do more in the way of remote working going forward? I know Bhairav was saying that the world of work has changed for good now, and certainly he and I have been experiencing that for some years and have seen it gradually progressing. But I think he's right. I think this is a real catalyst for good in a lot of ways, for people to have more control over their lives, not just their working lives, but their lives in general, and be able to say, these are the times when I'm available to work, and these are the other times where I have other responsibilities or things that I need to do. So the third thing within the Agile Manifesto there, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Now, this is again about not over-engineering things, making sure that it's people-focused interaction. So this could be with clients, but it could also be with your team members. You may feel that you need to sort of recontract about how you're going to work going forward, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bureaucratic process. It could be very much a discussion on a one-to-one basis. What works for you? When are you available? Okay, how do we best share that information with other team members, and agree as you go what's going to work for everyone. Okay, same goes with clients, as I said, and this could well be an opportunity for you to reach out to clients and escalate the relationship, but in a very human way, and say, look, we're all in this situation together, just wanted to come back to you and find out exactly how communications are going to work better for you going forward as well, and possibly invite them into some of these team discussions so that you have that direct input.
Mike, let me just interrupt you because I think not that you have time, but there's a couple of good questions here that have come up that I think could be worthwhile in the time we've got. But how do you stop overworking while working remotely, and how do you keep your team motivated while they work remotely?
Absolutely. I think that the way I've always done it, and we always do it at Skills Hive, we have like a one-to-one conversation that's very much about, well, what's your next personal milestone? And if you can start to tune into those individuals' medium to long-term trajectory, where they're trying to get to in their lives, you can start to reference those things in the day-to-day and say, look, this is going to really help you get where you want to go, and explain and demonstrate how the work they're doing right now is part of the big picture. But in terms of overwork, I think what you said previously about just having a very well-structured set of tools for communication, but also timeline for communication, which accounts for the fact that, on the last point here, embrace uncertainty, right? Things will change. You cannot plan for everything. 80% is good enough, but always be ready to change that process or to override that process if need be. So yes, have your daily stand-ups, have your weekly objective setting with team leaders, but if there's a crisis, then you have to jump on it and deal with it. But as long as people have that framework to work within, they're usually able to cope with those crises when they emerge.
Yeah, I think overworking is important. I think a lot of what my team do is they have reminders to make them move. So I've been in that situation, I'm sure you have as well, where you've just sat down for 7 hours and you realise you haven't gone. So you sit down. My
watch does it. My watch does it now. It says, "Why don't you do a stretch?" And I find myself going like this. It's bizarre. Yeah.
So are there any other questions for Mike? I know, sorry, Mike, we had to cut you a little bit short. That's but fine. Mike, how do people get in contact with you if they need to?
I did put a link in the chat already around with my LinkedIn profile. That's probably the best way because it has all my other details on there, and it has live chat on there. You can see when I'm online. I use it quite a lot. So yeah, I'll repost that link again now.
And we'll be sharing all the slides and everything, and of course you can get in touch with Mike. And we'll be sharing the slides after this, and you can obviously follow this again on the recording. So I'm going to hand over to Robert Flint now from Carbon Law. Where are you, Mark? There you are. Stop sharing this. So you there, Robert? Yes, there he is. We can indeed.
Excellent. So hello, I'm Robert Flint. I'm a commercial and corporate partner at Carbon Law Partners, which is a platform law firm, a network of 35 partners across all disciplines across the UK. It was interesting listening to the previous seminar because we already work flexibly. We already work from home, so we're sort of used to doing that. We can plug into businesses or operate as a normal law firm depending on what clients need. So this webinar is about commercial contracts in the context of coronavirus. Specifically, the 4 points I'm going to be looking at are: is there a contract at all? Force majeure clauses, frustration of contracts, and commercial considerations in relation to those. So, and I'll answer questions at the end. So why is that relevant? Well, obviously, if the economy has basically been upended over the last month or so, and you may have contracts with suppliers or clients that either you want to avoid or they want to avoid and you don't want to avoid. So what are your rights and what are their rights, and how would you go about getting the outcome that you want? So first of all, the first point in the webinar is there a contract? So first of all, an oral contract can be a contract. So you don't need to have anything written down, provided that the formalities of contract formation are complied with. So the formalities of a contract are: there must be an offer, there must be acceptance of that offer, there must be intention to create legal relations, there must be some form of consideration, and the terms must be clear as to what the parties have agreed. So in terms of how that works in practice, an offer and acceptance, there must be some point at which the parties agree on the final terms. So you can't just continue negotiations. If I say I will sell this to you for £10 and someone else says, well, no, I'll buy it for £5, then you haven't got a contract because the terms have never been agreed. However, you can be deemed to accept terms if you carry on as if the contract has been agreed. So it's called deemed acceptance by behaviour. So watch out for that. If you want to be avoiding a contract and saying the contract's never existed, if you've been acting as if it has existed, then it probably does exist. So if you want your contract with a supplier or with a client to continue, what do you do? So if it's an oral contract, first thing obviously to say is get it in writing as quickly as you can, and get them to agree the final position. So you can do this on email. They don't need to sign it. Signing is better because then there's no doubt as to who has signed the contract. But an email is fine. Get them to agree the position. Ensure there is some form of consideration that the contract is agreed, and when it starts to operate, what's the date of the contract. If you, on the other hand, don't want there to have been a contract, and you're starting to think, oh, I don't want to, I want to act if there is no contract, what can you do? So if it's an oral contract, obviously, then it's harder for the other side to prove that there's been a contract at all, because maybe if there's nothing written down, there might not be any evidence that there has been sufficient clarity of terms, that there has been an offer, that there has been a final acceptance, and it's easier to say that there's perhaps no intention to create legal relations. It's an informal thing that you've been doing. It might be easy to show that there's been no consideration, no money has changed hands. So that's what you could potentially do there. If you do have a piece of paper that looks a lot like a contract, then it's worth looking at what the terms of the contract are, and specifically in the context of coronavirus and wanting to try and avoid contract potentially, look at the termination clause. So is there anything in there that says what the notice provisions are for giving termination? How much notice do you need to give? Is it easy? If you want the contract to continue, if someone else has served a notice on you to terminate, have a look at the steps that are required. Have they complied with the steps properly? And if not, then you can say you haven't given us the notice properly, so the contract continues. Equally, if you want to serve notice to terminate, then make sure you do it correctly, because the other side might argue, as I've just said. Also, if there's a disputes resolution clause in the contract, that can be handy. It makes it might refer to a mediator or an arbitrator, and that is useful because it avoids too much cost in going to court. And obviously, I think the courts are going to be quite well. They're obviously struggling at the moment anyway because they can't physically sit, and there's likely to be a backlog of cases, and there's likely to be an awful lot more cases when the economy gets going again. Everyone starts to see where the dust has settled. So one clause that you may see in a contract, and it's the second part of this webinar, is a force majeure clause. So not all contracts will have a force majeure clause, but what it does is it typically excuses one party or both parties from the performance of the contract in some way following the occurrence of certain trigger events. And those events are outside a party's control. And if those events happen, then the party is entitled or excused from performing certain obligations under the contract. So typical trigger events for a force majeure clause, and again, it depends on how the clause is drafted as to how it operates. So typical trigger events are illegality. So if the law changes, that means that the performance of your contract is illegal, then that is often a force majeure event. A terrorist incident, typically. So, for example, if you're organising an event, a terrorist incident might well be a force majeure event. A pandemic, such as the coronavirus outbreak, can be a force majeure event, an epidemic. Civil emergency such as rioting, or compliance with government requests. So examples of force majeure events that have been used in cases or have been tried to be used in cases in the past include the introduction of the euro, financial crisis, Brexit. Coronavirus will almost certainly be used as an excuse or as a trigger, rather, for force majeure clause going forward. Climate change, extreme weather events, that sort of thing, may also trigger force majeure clauses depending on how they're drafted. So often force majeure clauses will include a sort of mop-up event, which will be phrased in some way like unforeseeable act or event which was beyond the reasonable control of either party. And that is designed to catch things like coronavirus that it isn't listed anywhere else in the clause. So in that situation, coronavirus probably is an unforeseeable event. It certainly is beyond the reasonable control of the parties. The only fly in the ointment there, if you're trying to trigger a force majeure clause, obviously, is that if you've entered into the contract after the coronavirus outbreak has become known about, then it will be much harder to rely on that trigger. So things to note about force majeure clauses when you're looking at them. The burden of proof is on the party seeking to rely on the force majeure clause. So you have to prove that the event falls within one of the trigger events listed in the clause. You must prove that the performance has become legally or physically impossible due to the event. And the force majeure event must be the only effective cause of the non-performance. So if there are several reasons why you haven't been able to deliver the terms of your contract, you haven't performed your obligations, then the force majeure won't be triggered. It has to be the only cause for you not performing. Equally, if you have a clause that says events beyond the control of the relevant party, then the parties are under an obligation to try to mitigate the impact of the event and to reduce the effects in any way possible. And so in the context of coronavirus, there are means to mitigate the effect of the event because you've got government support. So you would be expected to avail yourself of that support, and to the extent that support makes a difference, then you're not be able to force majeure clause. So what is the effect of a force majeure clause? I'm conscious I've not got much time left. It depends on the drafting, but for the most part, it suspends the operation of the contract, so that you no longer have to perform obligations under the contract for the duration that the force majeure event is ongoing. Your liability for any non-performance is also goes away, but occasionally the force majeure clause will include an option to terminate for either party or just for one party, depending on how long the event is ongoing for. So if coronavirus lasts for 4 months, maybe you'll be given an option to terminate because neither of you can deliver on the terms of the contract. Specific contracts, leases very rarely have force majeure clauses in them. Standard terms, so standard terms and conditions will be subject to the Unfair Contract Terms Act 1977. So they'll have to be reasonable. Any force majeure clauses in standard terms and conditions. If they're not reasonable, then you can challenge them. If you, on the other hand, have a consumer contract of any kind, then they will be subject to the consumer rights legislation, and rules are much stricter about force majeure clauses in consumer contracts. So
just interrupt you there.
Consumers may be within the rights to avoid.
Just interrupt you there because we've got a couple of questions that we should address before time's up. So the first question is from Susan. If a company is wound up and takes over another company's assets, sorry, another company takes over that company's assets, does an existing contract for services persist across the two companies?
So if you're taking over the shares, if you're getting the shares,
yeah, I guess
you're getting the shares in the company, then that company, the company is an individual essentially, so its obligations under its contracts remain. If you're buying shares in a company, if you're buying a business, if you're buying a business, so the contracts, the employees potentially going to be cheaped across to your business, then it depends on the contract, but yes, probably you'll be bound by the terms of the contract. There may be a change of control clause in those contracts, which allows the other supplier to terminate the contract if there's a change of control.
So last question from Abigail says, can you delay signing a contract? So she says, our landlord has just sent through contract for one of the business properties, which they've been waiting a while for. They're unhappy to sign this until the situation improves. And at the moment, they're on a month-by-month temp contract, which goes both ways. So the ball is in their court. So should she delay signing that long-term contract? I guess.
So there's the business contract, isn't it? So the normal protections for residential contract leases wouldn't apply. But if you're already happy with the contract you're on, then you're in. This is more of a sort of commercial negotiating point rather than a legal question. If you're happy with it, then don't sign. Wait and then see what they do. Are they going to? Do they desperately want you to sign it? If so, why? I wouldn't sign unless you really had to. But happy to answer that in more detail.
So how can people get in touch with you if they need to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So hold up. This is my, can you see that?
Not very well.
Okay, so my email address is robert.flint@carbonlawpartners.com. And that's my phone number there, 07961 536 337.
We can do, well, I guess what the best thing to do is after the, now if you just type in your details into the chat, that'd be great. All right, thanks for that, Robert.
Okay, we'll do.
I'm going to bring in Raymond now. So
okay.
Let me bring in Raymond. He's bringing himself in. Go Raymond. And Robert, I'll just turn you off.
Yeah.
Right, Raymond, please feel free to go ahead. I will.
Do I need to load my own presentation in? No?
Should be there as a screen share. So if you go to the view sharing options, you should be able to see it.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay, so just to give you a good afternoon, everyone. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself. I founded Agnentis Partners best part of 5 years ago now. I am a finance director of 20 years. And in the context to which I present this, I'm also a parent. So I am a small business owner, a parent, and I'm with a finance background. Talking about maintaining financial agility through the crisis, he says, right, there is. Part of the challenge that we have right now from a financial perspective is that we are in uncharted waters. And we have competing aspects going on in our heads for example, with the short term and making sure we are okay, whilst being able to still think about how we go forward from here. We're in a very much a survival place at the moment, yet at some point we need to think about how we revive and actually how we ultimately thrive, because this is not the norm, it is now. And one of the other aspects is that competing for our attention right now and impacting on our emotions very much so is our business and how we're coping and challenged with that, and our family, having children at home, but as parents and as individuals, and that the two are unique, are similar bedfellows, not to be treated as independently. So what are our priorities right now? And I'm sure you've heard a lot from your accountants and everything. Managing your money, yes. Cut your costs, manage your cash, know where you are, make sure you know what support you are able to get from the government, find a way to make sure that you are accessing individuals who can help you get the kind of support that you actually need right now. Get yourself to a place where you are cocooned and you are protected. But also manage your energy. Right now, stay calm. Talk to someone who is an experienced person in finance to help you. Don't try to go this alone. It really isn't the time. Manage your time. Focus on the elements that you can control. Cut your costs. Manage your costs. Manage your cash flow. But if you're waiting for that contract to come through that may or may not happen, don't spend your time worrying about it. Deal with what you can deal with right now. But more so, manage your expectations. This is not now. April is going to be hard. The time ahead is hard. We're in uncharted territories. We don't know what's coming up. Do what you can do and manage what is possible. But where are we going? And I think it's important that whilst we're in survival mode, we do take a look at where we are going from here. There is going to be a greater emphasis on people. We've talked about the way we work remotely, but also financially, how we remunerate, how we train, how we develop. There's going to be an even greater emphasis on value. Clients are going to be asking for more for less. And as business owners, we need to look at our businesses and understand how we create value, how we create margin in our business, and how we are going to do that differently moving forward. We need to have more resilient systems and processes, more cash, less debt, more flexibility, more adaptive models, better ways of working, better ways of delivering to clients, better ways of understanding how we as businesses work, and having more flexible arrangements so that we can be more adaptable to circumstances as we change. So what do we do? As the nice picture of the Lego indicates, for business owners right now, there is going to be an element of taking apart the business that we've loved and built over the number of years that we have had them, and we are going to need to put them back together differently. So whilst it's important to know where your money has gone, it is important, just as important to know where your money is coming from and where you want it to go. It's important that we learn the lessons of what we have done in the past to improve our opportunities for moving forwards. Not just about creating a cash flow, it's about principles and guidelines and values, understanding a financial plan that is driven by what is important to us, and how we will build financial models moving forwards that are people orientated as well as financially orientated. Take the opportunity right now to increase your financial awareness. There's a lot of information out there around how to do funding, how to improve your business finances. Take the opportunity now to talk to someone and engage someone to help you understand how better to engage you in the finances of your business. But not only information, it's also about emotion. So many of us right now are worried about our financial circumstances. So many of us have made decisions in the past based on what we believed at the time to be the best information available that are impacting on us emotionally today. It's important as we move forward to understand what the impact of those decisions are on us and why we make the decisions that we do emotionally. So when we build that effective financial system, that collated model that includes our cash flows and our P&Ls and all of that together, our funders, it needs to include two things. One, it needs to link to our family finances. It needs to bring the two together. Many businesses right now and business owners right now will be really struggling trying to join the two together. Maybe for years have worked the two independently. They are not. They are one model, and it's important that the model moving forward takes into consideration what the business does and what we need as families. But also build into it a decision-making model. At home, when we choose whether we want to go on holiday, where we want to go, whether we want to buy a car, we make value-based decisions. We talk to our partners about it. That's the kind of decision-making that needs to be in place within a business. And the opportunity while we are here now is to make those kinds of changes. So now, as hard as this is to hear, it is not the time to be looking at your feet. Now is the time to manage the short term, engage others to help us to manage the situation we find ourselves in today, and look to the horizon to build for the futures that we still want, even though the circumstances today are as challenging as they are. Put in place those foundations, those principles and values around your money, the cash flow modeling, the understanding of where you make your money, where you want your money to go, and who is going to manage, who are you going to engage to help you, not just now, but as you move forward, to have a better business tomorrow than what you came into the crisis with. We need to come out of this with better businesses than what we came in with. So using the Jim Rohn quote, many of us still have the dream that we started out with our businesses and for our aspirations and what that will mean for our families. And it still remains. There are two options to everybody who's on this call right now, and that is either to give up or to get help. Ask for help. There are many people out there who are willing to help you. It is not a time to stand alone. Now is a time for all small businesses to stand together to help each other. It's time to work in partnership with those you trust. Working in partnership in business is much like your marriage. You're in it together, you work with people that you trust, and in this context, your business is your child. Work with people who care about your child as much as you do. Work with people who understand what it's like to be here right now and who can help you navigate this so that you are stronger for the future. And more than anything, there are loads of people on this call who are absolutely engaged in this way of working moving forwards. So please ask any questions that you have. It's really important, especially when it comes to finances and the impact that it has on us as individuals. Thank you.
There's a question from a couple of people. Rajan is one of them, and I think Murray is the second one. So it's around about obviously getting money from your customers and paying your suppliers. So obviously we're at that stage now where we need to work together with everyone to get that money from people to pay other people. What kind of tactics or what approach do you normally take it in a situation like this to make sure you can get the money that you need and that your suppliers are paid fairly?
Well, the one thing you need to do is you need to talk to them, to your suppliers in particular. I think the one thing you need to do is you must talk to them and let them know what's going on, because we are all in the same place. From client perspective, historically, I've used invoice discounting facilities, because what that enables you to do is actually to accelerate some of that cash moving forwards. And I'm sure there are other funders on the call who will be able to, who would hopefully help you to find short-term funding to ensure that whilst you may not be able to be paid, that there is a way to cash flow, working capital your way through this position at the moment. I'm not sure that legal action is actually going to get you very far at the moment when we're all sitting in a good place. And I think if everybody's in the same place, I think as small businesses, I think the challenge is when you deal with big businesses who sometimes don't really care, I think fundamentally. And I think in that respect, you probably are better off talking to someone who actually knows how to bring funds to your business in the short term, knowing that they are secured against certain collections.
So there was a question earlier about the coronavirus business interruption scheme. I'm not sure how much you know about that and how the factoring piece works there and how you can get invoice factoring.
Well, if we talk about C-bills, it's a very long process, and at the moment I'm hoping, and I've heard rumours that they're going to slightly relax the obligations to get some of these loans. 4 to 6 weeks, it's a long time, and if you need help with C-bills, seek the help of someone who's been through the funding process before, because in many ways the funders are looking not only for history, they're looking for confidence moving forwards. So I would engage someone who has actually been through a funding process, whether it be a bank or one of those other funders that are on the business bank approved lenders. Invoice discounters, I think that's a much more, in some ways, sensible way to go, because it's asset backed and the asset is the debt. So in many ways, it's an easier conversation to have than having to talk about having to secure your personal home or second home or something like that against trying to borrow some money.
Okay, there's coming through that are a little bit towards the government actually and local council, which I don't think you can really answer. So I guess time is up now anyway. Thanks for that, Raymond. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring in Helen Roberts. So as the majority will know her.
Ross, thank you.
We'll go and find her and then turn her on.
I do that.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
So Helen needs no introduction. I'm going to turn my mic off and let
Fantastic. Thanks a million, Bhairav. Okay, guys, my session is going to be around how to maintain a mindset, a growth mindset in this crisis. Now, I know it's difficult. It's a really difficult, tough time. Quick story about me. I'm an entrepreneur. I set up my first business back in 1998, have gone on to set up multiple businesses since then. And in the last 10 years, I've helped thousands of other people to do the same thing, start businesses and also help people to grow theirs as well. When I started my first business in 98, it went super well. I built a multiple 7-figure business, went really well, blood, sweat, tears, long hours, lots of sacrifices. And then in 2008, when the financial crisis hit, I pretty much went from making hundreds of thousands of pounds per month to nothing overnight. The financial crisis changed everything. Now, let me tell you that changed everything in my life, that changed everything in my business. And in the 2 years after the financial crisis, when I'd lost everything, I learned more about myself and my business than I did in the previous 10 years when things were going so well. So I find that as entrepreneurs, when things are going well in our business, we tend to stay on that treadmill. We tend to not invest in ourselves, in our learning, in our development, because we're just keeping up. And that's what we're doing. So the coronavirus, it's created a whole new business landscape. And it actually reminds me of where things were back in 2008. And now there's a whole new set of rules of engagement. So as entrepreneurs, one thing that we have to continue to do is to look at those rules. How has the game changed? The game is still on. It's looking at how those rules have still changed, how those rules have changed. And we need to understand those rules so that we can build an offer to be able to embrace the rules of engagement now. So there's still plenty of money out there. People still need your products and services. Many people are also getting support from the government. Now, I can tell you back in 2008, we didn't get a cent. We didn't get anything from the government. Now, there's an unprecedented amount of support available from the government. So people have got access to some cash as well. So it is helping businesses. Now, I've got a deep passion around helping people to create the success that they want in their lives, but also to understand what makes some people successful and others not. And I've spent the last 10 years studying billionaires, multimillionaires, interviewing them across lots of different disciplines, business, sports, science, education, etc. And I want to share with you some of the key things that I've learned that hopefully will help you, give you some food for thought to survive this lockdown and come out fighting and come out stronger. The number one ingredient to keep your mind strong is that belief. If you believe that you can weather this storm, you will. If you don't believe that you can, you won't. It's this deep-seated belief that we have in ourselves. As entrepreneurs, we need to continue to nurture ourselves. We need to foster that belief inside ourselves to shore ourselves up so that we can make sure that we are in the best possible position that we can. And when I went through the financial crisis in 2008, the first thing that I did was beat myself with a stick and tell myself that I wasn't good enough. And I wasn't, the business wasn't agile enough. And I should have seen it coming. It didn't serve me. I went into this negative state and pattern of beliefs that didn't serve me and didn't serve me very well. So first thing, belief. Make sure that you believe that you can. Shore yourself up. Monitor the thoughts that you're thinking and make sure that they're positive. Water your own garden. Number two, focus. Focus on what we can control, not on what we can't. Why would we expend lots of energy on stuff that we can't influence, that we don't have an impact on. Super successful people that can go on to create the life that they want and the success that they have in their business and in other areas of their life can actually focus on the right things, the things that can serve you. So one of the things that we need to be careful of right now is consuming ourselves with negativity around the media. I know people that have got themselves into a flat spin around coronavirus because they're watching every single news update out there. They're looking at media of all of these, pitiful, sorrowful stories. Now look, yes, it's tragic, but we can't consume ourselves with this, because what happens is we will have this fear, and it actually debilitates us. It stops us in our tracks, and it actually paralyzes our thinking. It paralyzes us into inaction, and all we do is sit on the couch and watch box sets. We can't do that. The way I see it, we've got two choices. We can jump into the passenger seat and let life happen to us and see what happens at the end of this crisis, or we can actually jump into the driving seat. We can get our hands firmly on the wheel, and we can choose the direction that we take. Now, Dr. Deepak Chopra says 99% of the stuff we worry about never happens. Let's not waste our time. Let's focus on the things that we can work on and we have control over, and let's take some action. Third thing, facing the mirror. When I went through the crisis in 2008, I lost ground because at the beginning, I was in complete denial. I couldn't accept the position. I thought it was going to change and turn around overnight, but actually it didn't. It was a deep recession. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with this coronavirus and how long it's going to be, but we need to be prepared now. We need to look at this right now in terms of what's going on, because otherwise, if we don't accept it, we stand still and we perpetuate this situation, and we're not doing anything to change our circumstances. So we need to look right now at our current position, what's going on in our business, in our finances, in our health and well-being, in our relationships, in whatever element of your life that you need to look at. We need to face the mirror. We need to be honest. We need to look at what's going on, and then we need to take some action. We need to look at each and every day. We need to plan. We need to plan our days. We need to plan our objectives over the next week, month, couple of months, even to the end of the year. Take action each and every day on the things that are going to make the biggest difference to your business. What are the top couple of things that you can do inside your business over the next couple of months that can make the biggest difference? What can you do in your personal life that can make a difference? Many of us are juggling family life and working from home and trying to run a business and remodel our business to be able to take advantage of this crisis. Now, we've got to take the time to be able to make that happen. We've got to plan it, we've got to protect it, we've got to set objectives, we've got to set ourselves up for these wins. So we need to look at our critical drivers across our business, so that again, if we work from the worst case scenario and work back, the reason I say let's work from the worst case scenario is let's face it. Let's face the fear. And sometimes by facing it and by committing it to paper, it actually takes some of the power away from it. Okay, so face off your work. Let's work from the worst case scenario and what that would look like, and then work backwards. So what can we do right now in terms of our cash flow? What's our current position? How long can we manage with cash that we have to sustain ourselves? What support is available for you right now from the government? How can you access that? You need to look at that right now. What invoices have you got outstanding? How can you do business online? How can you pivot? As entrepreneurs, our business landscape is changing every single day. We have to keep our eyes on that landscape. What small steps can we take every day to action that and to change it? Now, we need to create a mindset that can help us to spot these opportunities. Now, where is our mindset right now? And that's a question. What's going on for us? Are we in the poor me mode and feeling sorry for ourselves, which I know I was back in 2008, and I was in that hole and I couldn't really get out of it and I couldn't see opportunities? Or are we in the space of, right, okay, the shit has hit the fan, this is where we're at, and this is what we need to do. We need to do some work around that. So we need to set ourselves up for some daily wins. We need to set these small objectives, and we need to start ticking those off and achieving those. By actually planning and managing your time, it means that you set some specific time to work on your business, rather than watching Netflix, going to the fridge, having umpteen distractions. We need to plan, protect that time. We need to look at the critical drivers of our business, and we need to set ourselves up for daily wins. We need to focus on those key core things. If we utilize our time well now, we will come out of this in a much better position than when we came into it. Now, the way that businesses work today, many businesses can now operate and build revenue from being online. Now, since 2008, when our crisis hit, we have been working remotely ever since, because we saw the crash and we saw what happened, and we wanted to make the most of the landscape that was there. So guys, it's important, utilize your time well. Now is the time to plan and protect it, and to do the things that you always talk about that you never have time to do. And the next thing is be happy. One of the things I've learned as well is, and from other people too, it's being happy with where you're at right now and not waiting for something to happen until I'll be happy. So when this crisis is over, I'll be happy. When I make my next 10,000 feet, I'll be happy. No, be happy right now. Be happy from the inside out rather than on external factors. And I know it's easy for me to say that, you might think, but ultimately the thoughts that we think, we have a choice. We either decide to think more positive thoughts, or we decide to go down that vortex of despair. Every morning, let's have the attitude of gratitude. What are we grateful for? Let's be mindful of that. Every day, let's do some things that make us happy. Get out there for a run, have a walk, sit in the garden, meditate, do our DIY, do some gardening. I mean, I've been threatening to do some gardening for like 10 years and it's never happened, but now I've got the seeds, now I've got the compost, now I'm ready to do something. Spend some time on your own personal development and your professional development. We need to develop, as entrepreneurs, we need to put more tools in our toolbox right now so that we can actually evolve and pivot so that we can make the most of this time. Spend time with your kids, spend time with your loved ones, use technology to engage. I know we're social beings, we're out there all the time. There's so much technology out there. People can dance, online, they can do their fitness online. One of our people in our Startup Richmond community was doing a virtual running class last night. So, and again, there's lots of ways to connect with family, with friends, with loved ones, and doing things that you love. Now, the people that are going to come out of this crisis in better shape are the ones that can maintain this positive mindset no matter what happens. So, okay, quick thing for you guys to look at is an inventory of your thoughts right now. One of the things I did in 2008 was, as well, I realized that my mindset was in a horrendous space. I was thinking mostly negative stuff. On your notepad or on your piece of paper, draw a column down the middle, have your positive and your negative. And every time you have a positive thought, a dash. Every time you have a negative, and see what's going on. And you know what? If there's more on the negative side, which I know there was for me too, you need to change that. You need to water that garden, and you need to get yourself into a better place. Because here's the thing. If you're not in a great space in your mind, you're no good to yourself, you're no good to your family, you're no good to your team, and you're no good to your clients or your business. So we need to manage that first and foremost, okay? And we need to be able to come out of this thriving, okay? We want to be in a position whereby we're not swimming upstream when everything's hard. We want to be going downstream with the flow. Another thing we need to think about is our environment. You become your environment. Have the right people around you, support each other. Never before has it been so important for us entrepreneurs, these small business owners, to work together, to share how we're feeling, what we're thinking, what's going on. Tell people about the business challenges that you have. Get support from each other. Invest in yourself, develop yourself, work hard on your business. Now is the time. And so lastly, let's move on to this. And the key thing here is, guys, we can't forget to water our own garden. If we forget to do that, we won't come out of this in the place that we want to. So this is some food for thought for you. If you can get this right, this will make the single most important difference to your life and to your business. This will enable you to see the opportunities that will affect change across your business and every aspect of your life. So look, guys, I urge you, don't just survive this lockdown. Come out stronger, and let's thrive together.
Hi, Helen. So just a great question from Andy here. He's asking, how do I as an entrepreneur influence others in my business that don't believe in its long-term viability? I think that's a question a lot of entrepreneurs especially will be asking themselves now.
Yeah, and it's a great question, Bhairav, and this is something I've been working with over the last few weeks, business owners to lead. Because here's the thing, the greatest power that you can have as an entrepreneur and as a leader is actually to lead and to be the example of what you're teaching, right? So I think here's the thing. I think it's being honest with your staff. It's about, we don't know where things are at. We don't know how long this is going to go on for. But look, let's control what we can control. Let's look at our business right now. Where are we at? Where do we want to go? What can we do in the next 2 or 3 months, okay? And I guess just keeping it real and taking each day and focus on those projects, the things that you actually haven't been able to work on up to now. And I think if you can do that, and you can show great leadership and guidance and support, and actually listen to people's concerns and fears and help them to navigate it through it, I think that would be the best thing that you can do for yourself and for your business.
Well, thanks for that, Helen. It's been great. So I'm going to bring in Nigel Davey now from SME Needs, talking about marketing. So for those of you on the webinar still here, the next 2 sessions are around marketing, and then we bring in Colm Devine from Accelerated Payments around invoice financing and accessing financing during this period. So I'm going to, I guess Nigel.
I've brought myself in yet.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, guys.
And
thanks, Helen.
Cheers. And I will turn myself off now.
Hi. So thanks, Bhairav. Thanks, Helen, for obviously organising all of this. Forgive the background behind me. Those shelves are normally full of various amounts of, let's call it family stuff. So I've just hidden it from you. Today, really, what I'm looking to do is talk to you about focusing, talking about the importance of focusing your marketing, particularly at this, let's call it an unusual time in our business lives. Before that, let me just give you a very quick potted history. SME Needs is a virtual CMO, virtual or part-time marketing director service. So what we do is manage the marketing for smaller businesses where it doesn't make sense for them to employ their own senior people. Part of that, particularly right up front, is that strategic piece, and is about saying, who do you actually want to sell to? Who do you want to market to? And so that's the piece what I want to focus on for today. So let me share my screen so that you can see the presentation I've got. So what I'm going to do, some of this that you'll see has almost a basis within networking. So a lot of it, I'm assuming that most of the audience here are small businesses, will have all done a huge amount of networking in the past, and so I think it's just easier to refer to some of these. What I'm hoping is that this will give you a lot to think about now, particularly if you are quiet. This is an ideal opportunity to actually sit down and work on your business, like Helen sort of referred to a moment ago about working on you as a business owner. This is about working on your business and making sure that the planning that you do now, when you've got the time, can really kick in and help your business going forward. So as you see, I've got sort of anyone is the silliest word in marketing, and it's about sort of maintaining your marketing focus. Just as a few examples, so decorators wanting to talk to anyone who wants to decorate their house, chiropodists asking to talk to anyone with a spine, an IFA seeking introductions to anyone who wants to retire in the future. Now, in a networking circle, those will probably get a bit of a giggle, especially the chiropodist. In reality, actually, he doesn't want to talk to anyone with a spine. Most people's spines work perfectly well. He wants to talk to people whose spines don't work. And so it's about making sure that you're being as focused as possible, so that actually within networking circles, people can make the right introductions, but within your overall marketing, it's about making sure you're focusing on the right people. Yeah, because in reality, so it's just very quickly, some companies will never ever need your services or your products. Yeah, some companies are too far away. If you sell a service which is effectively you've got to get there or you've got to deliver you to that service, to that client. if that involves traveling and it's something that can't be done in the way that we're talking today, it's going to be difficult. So think about, again, about focusing, looking at company size, looking at products they need, looking at issues, and sort of going from there. Okay, so let's I suppose just use a bit of a graphic to explain what I mean. So if you imagine this blue circle as every business in the country, there are what, 5.5 million small businesses in the country. You're right in the middle of that. What you do is you look and say, okay, who do I want to sell to? Who's my perfect client? What do they look like? What are their needs? What are their issues? And then you can map them on there. So you want to sell to that person. And the reason that I talk about it being a single person is it's far easier to think about a single person to work out their needs, their issues, their problems, and how you can help them, than if you're trying to think about hundreds, if not thousands of people. But the thing is, if your ideal client is, for example, so my ideal client is the managing director of a small business, up to about 30 people who wants to take their marketing forward. I do a lot of work in the tech sector, but we're doing some more and more consumer work at the moment as well. So if I said my ideal client was a tech MD in Croydon, the issues and the problems that tech MDs in Bristol, in Nottingham, in Manchester face are exactly the same. The issues that an MD of a software development company or an IT services business are exactly the same. And what happens is you develop this wedge of customers that goes from being that one person to potentially thousands. You know, the messages that you develop when thinking about that ideal client will resonate with that whole sort of sector of people. And because what you want to do is define that engaged audience as the graphic suggests, because then you can focus your marketing and your marketing resources, whether those resources are cash or whether those resources are time. The more you focus, the more effective it will be. So if you say you won £1 million, yeah, you had £1 million to invest on your marketing. If you try and spread that across every business in the country, you're investing less than 20 pence per business. If you've worked out that your engaged audience is 1,000 businesses in your area, that £1 million you could spend £1,000 per company targeting those. Now, which do you think is going to be more effective? Spending 20 pence to try and target a business and get you in the door, or spending £1,000? Now, I know I'm not most of us haven't got £1 million to spend on our marketing, but I'm just using that as an example. The reason though that I sort of then talk about the big boys is, again, referring to the word anyone. Yeah, if you look at the marketing and strategic reports of any of the bigger companies, I'm using Diageo as an example here, the word anyone never appears. They sell a multiple of products to multiple audiences, but they have a very specific description of every single customer and target audience that they have. And there's no reason why you can't do exactly the same. Yeah, now let's just cover a few sort of points around this and why you should do this. If you focus your audience, if you've identified your ideal client and identified your target audience, you'll make much better use of your resources. Your messaging will engage more effectively. Yeah, if you're talking about a particular issue to somebody that is highly likely to have that issue, they're going to listen to you. They're going to listen to you because you've said, "I can help," and then they're going to listen to you and find out how it is that you can help them with that particular issue. That will lead to more leads, and that will lead to more sales. Now, one of the questions I do get when asked about this is then going, well, what about people outside my target audience? So what about people that are appearing in the circle where the pennies are? You don't have to turn those people away. You know, just because you're focusing on that engaged audience, if you honestly believe that you can help that particular company that has come to you because of your marketing, then help them. Take their money, deliver the service, deliver on your promises, and work with that customer. You don't have to turn them away. But if you focus on the right audience and people you can help, then you're far more likely to generate the sales and the leads that you need. So I hope this has been useful. I hope this has given you something to think about during the the next few weeks whilst we are all in lockdown, and that will help you to then go forward and to really build your business and as Helen said, come out fighting from all of this.
Thanks for that, Nigel. So if any questions, please put them in the chat. So there was one question that came up earlier around, should you stop marketing now during the crisis?
Obviously, as a marketing consultant, I'm going to say no. But really, the answer is no. If you stop marketing now, because we see so many messages, because we get so many messages thrown at us through social media, through email, through all the other channels, if you stop marketing now, the chances are that you're going to get forgotten by your target audience. Yeah, don't sell to them, especially don't sell to them if you're in a really sensitive market. But
so there's a question that's come up that obviously Lina wasn't able to answer before, but is around testing the B2C offering without confusing the B2B offering. Not sure.
So I saw that it came up right at the beginning of this sort of summit, didn't it? And I think what I've just talked through should really help with that. If you've got a product or a service that you believe has got a B2C offering as well as your B2B, you're operating with two separate audiences and two separate ideal clients. So if whatever that product is, it will be able to help the consumers in a certain set of ways. Now think about that. How is it you can communicate across to that consumer audience that how it is going to help those? And that's going to probably differ, or it's almost certainly going to differ from the B2B space. So actually what you've got is two separate audiences. The chances are it's going to be two separate sets of marketing channels as well. And so actually you should be able to relatively easily separate the two.
So there's a question from Uzma. She's a consultant, she provides consulting services. Should she start with the kind of issues, problems she can help offer her services on? I guess this question around messaging, should she frame it as a problem that she can solve or the solution that she can, you know?
So the way I work with my clients on it is say, you've probably got an idea of the type of people you want to sell to. Now let's map out their issues. What are the problems that they have? Which of those can you help with your consulting service? And then that will help you to develop those key messages that you need to use in your marketing.
So generally, I mean, I guess one of the questions I had for you earlier was, you know, how have you seen the market, your client base, and because you mentioned actually there's more marketing going on within your set of organizations you work with.
Yeah, so we're actually quite lucky. We've had a number of inquiries come in. We've had hopefully a couple of sales come out of that as well, because people are recognizing that they do need to keep in touch and keep in touch more. Their marketing needs to be adapted. I don't think there's certainly nothing you shouldn't be changing your marketing, but you need to adapt it so that the messaging is right and appropriate for what is a very
I guess that's probably my last question around that before Graham comes in. Is how do you sell without selling? If you see what I mean.
For me, it's about demonstrating actually that value piece, that how it is that you can actually help solve a problem for somebody. Yeah, so if people recognize the value and recognize and believe that you can solve a problem that they have, actually they'll come to you, they'll be asking for more information, and then it's about you providing enough information that will help them to reduce that perceived risk in their minds, and go, yeah, actually it's worth talking to that person, it's worth buying at least some of their services to start with.
Right, perfect.
And then go from
Thanks
there.
for that, Nigel. Thanks for that. How do people get in contact with you again?
So easiest way, my website is smeneeds.co.uk. You can find me on all of the sort of the main social media channels, and I will add my email address to the
So
chat.
I'm going to bring in Graham Brennan now from ANI Connects. Graham, I'm going to turn your cam on and your mic. I believe Nigel is now off. Yeah, okay, excellent. So I'm going to.
Let me just queue up or find my slides.
Right, I will turn myself.
Okay. And Bhairav, I can't see my slides, so I'm just going to try and find them. Here, no. Sorry, man, I can't hear you at the moment, but I can't see my slides, unfortunately.
I'll if you go off, I will start and get the slides for you. 2 seconds.
Perfect, that's cool. Okay, cool. So yeah, just to follow on really on the theme of marketing, and from what Nigel says, I think it probably complements what he was just talking about. So I'll keep it at the level that I operate. So I formed ANI Connects a couple of years ago to work with organizations and help them think strategically around all of the marketing actions that they're taking, and try to find efficiency and effectiveness at an organizational level about how they engage and reach their audience. And my background, my training is in science, so I thought it would be interesting and timely to bring in a little something about the kind of scientific process and how that might help to structure and organize things. Bhairav, don't worry if my slides aren't popping up, I'll just talk through them. I can see them here as well, so I'll keep on theme. So obviously at the moment we're in a massive state of, there we go, great. We're in a massive state of disruption. With COVID-19, it's obviously disruptive to our organizations and to the country as a whole. And scientists now have rushed to the forefront to try and help with that whole situation. And the idea of a scientific process is that you work systematically and logically to discover how things are working and what's working right. And probably some of the most common kind of hazards that I come across with clients when I speak to them first is really around working less systematically and little sometimes in the face of logic, and kind of dealing with some of the struggles that result from that. So kind of common themes that I tend to discuss with them are kind of who looks after your marketing, whether or not you should hand it over to somebody else, or whether you should do it in-house. And the hazard really that comes across most often is that when you do hand it over to somebody else without an overall strategic kind of rein on things, you tend to, worst case scenario, get somebody who's extremely brilliant at what they can do for you, but they're not well guided, they don't feel well informed, and you sort of lose the benefit of having them. You don't maximize the efficiency from having them with you for the time that they're providing a service. And then the other hazard is kind of the something else hazard, like just darting from thing to thing. You know, using Facebook for a while or using an email campaign, just hoping that there's a one best method, and when it doesn't work, you kind of lose efficiency and effectiveness, you lose time, and you just jump from one to the other. And then feeling that marketing is something that you have to wait to plan, that it can't really be planned for, or that you have to wait till there's like, you know, you're ready to plan it. It's something that can be addressed really, really early on. So the scientific kind of method itself and the scientific process kind of boils down to a couple of key things. So on the left there, we've got the kind of traditional approach, or what I experience a lot of times when I speak to some of my clients early on, is that they'll kind of see a situation that's affecting them. They'll see that they're maybe not getting the growth that they want or getting the uptake that they'd like. They push through, they kind of perceive this as being just a painful, necessary stage. They push through, they'll react in a way that is sort of repetition of what they tried before, and they'll kind of go down the route of trial and error. We just keep on pushing, keep on trying something until something sticks. Well, the scientific method is a little bit more structured and kind of says to step back, take an observation of what's happening at that particular time, question what it is maybe you've been doing till now or what you could do going forward, test a new approach, learn from that new approach and adapt it and feed it back in. It's more tried and tested approach rather than trial and error. How that might look for you and your organization, we kind of fit in those questions in around your marketing themes. So kind of looking at what you've been doing so far and the growth that you have experienced as a result of whatever methods that you've been using to engage and reach and market to your audience. And just getting a sense of whether you're happy with that or whether you're not, whether it's necessary for a change and what sort of change you might perceive to need. And then question really specifically what is working for you and what's maybe an option to work best. I think one of the things that I come across early on with a lot of people is that they'll have a very good CRM system and perceive that to be the communication device that is the be all and end all, and then realize, well, actually it's great for organizing your leads and structuring them as to who you should be approaching, but it's maybe not overcoming the barrier of actually communicating directly to them. But most importantly, test a strategy, not a single method. So come away, if you can, from the holding on to one particular approach and like I said, trial and error until it's proven to not work, and then shifting onto something else. Actually align, roadmap, get a sense of your 3, 6, 12-month plan and fit in the actions that you can take in a systematic and logical way. And that's what I tend to do to help people out more often than not, and make little changes often. We were talking earlier on about kind of an agile mentality. That's one of the key kind of functions or key principles of an agile mentality. But really for me, I find applying a strategic approach, outlining, mapping what you're planning to do over the next 12 months rather than just being haphazard and reactionary. Because we essentially all want to kind of fit into this category of being clear, being confident, and have an impact on what we're doing, and that's sort of what underpins the scientific approach. But we'd love to kind of end up in a situation where we've got more people taking part, as the quote says there, for with less time and money spent on things that don't work. So organizing yourself around a series of things that you can do, revealing the actions that you've taken to date, getting a sense of what you can do within the confines of your resources and building on that as you see growth happening, rather than reactionary, running in any multiple number of directions that you kind of feel you should do. And actually right now is a really, really great time to sort of take stock of what you're doing. And this is a couple of simple steps that you can do that might, again, complement some of the speakers that have come before to fit in their recommendations, but do pretty much a whiteboarding exercise. And the 3 things I really kind of ask clients when I start off with them first is get a sense of what you've been doing to date. When you're the owner of your own business in particular, it's your responsibility really to manage every section. And sometimes marketing can be a really stressful one when we're not quite sure what's working, but without a good sense of what has happened till now, it's very hard to decide on what should change. So a really, really useful, very simple exercise, literally on a page, on a whiteboard if you have one, is to list all of the things that you perceive to be the methods you've used to communicate to your audience in the last 12 months. And then map against that what each one of those things have cost. And then have a consideration or think around the actions that you've taken, the various different methods you might have used, and what has been the outcome. Have you seen actually a response? Have you seen inquiries? Have you seen conversion? Have you seen a growth, or have you seen none and you're not quite sure what's been going on? And think about the lessons learned and whether or not you're happy with what's been happening to date. Again, if you've been happy, there's no real need at the moment to rush into trying to change or trying to do something different. If you're already kind of getting a good reaction or response to what you've been doing, that's fantastic. But if you're not happy, we want to look at incremental changes that you can make going forward. So in the next 12 months, we want to be thinking about what are your specific goals and targets. And again, Nigel was speaking really clearly about identifying specific people that you're looking for and not trying to be broad sweeping. So think about specific goals, specific targets in terms of volume of growth that you're looking for. And then milestones and events, that's really about thinking not just I'm going to do 5 things from here on out. It's actually mapping against the big events in your calendar going forward. It might be an event that you have, it might be a particular seasonal time of year that you're looking to capitalize on, and map those out, and then think about the time between now and then that you have to hand that you can actually take actions and map those. But really it's about one really important thing is about illustrating all of these things so you get that clarity. Again, when I do ask clients kind of what have you been doing to date, I often get the answer, well, not much. And then when we drill into it, there's an awful lot that has been going on. Like every communication device that you're using, every tool that you're using to outline and kind of illustrate what you do is a marketing method. But how you're using them and in what order you're using them and what principles you're using to kind of guide you going forward is really important. So the next thing then would be think about when things do open back up in the next kind of couple of weeks and months, what sort of support do you actually need? Is there a big gap there in terms of your confidence around what you're planning to do and how strategic you might be about doing things? Specific support you might need around identifying how you weigh up what's working and what's not in the kind of terms of evaluation, and then disruption support. And that both is from the side of what has affected you in the last couple of weeks, how it's disrupted you and how you get back on an even keel, and also how you might want to sort of feel confident about breaking out from the traditional approach that you've been taking to map out something new, something manageable, and something that you can kind of use taken forward in an efficient and effective way to engage your market. So think about what you've done till now, think about the things that you would specifically aim to achieve in the next month, the resources you have that will allow you to take action, and then what support you need to actually help you to initiate those new things, because often there's a big gap in that area of support and confidence and clarity around marketing and engagement. So think about what you might need to bring in, if at all. If you do want to get in touch with me, there's my contact details, and I think we'll shift back over to Bhairav.
Hi then, so we've got a question from Supriya around Google Analytics, and her question is, what are the alternatives Google Analytics reporting as it gets overwhelming with the amount of information? So I guess you do a lot of analytical work. You know, are there any other tools?
Yeah, well, look, the first thing I always kind of ask people to think about is how much Google Analytics actually kind of means to you in terms of whether or not it's representing the popularity of your website and the things that you're doing online, whether or not it's actually a realistic measure of conversion, whether or not it represents new clients getting in touch with you, whether it represents a relationship between the things that you've done other than the Google related boosting and people that have actually inquired with you. So think about it not as being the be all and end all in terms of the data that represents your success in marketing, but think about it as a component piece of the entire process that you're doing. So, you know, data points are everything from your Google Analytics information to also like the number of actions you took internally over the course of a week, and the overall kind of spend that you know that you can map. So what's your spend other than Google Analytics? So I kind of get people to kind of think internally at first around what data means and what data that they have that can tell the story of in the last week, in the last month, in the last year, the actions that they've taken, and build up a data that represents an action-reaction relationship. So Google Analytics is a good glimpse, is a good overview of kind of how popular you are online, and it can be a good indicator as you drill into it as to what people are paying attention to. But I'd love to, I often talk to people about what are the other things that represent the actions that they're taking. So are they attending events? Are they clear about who they're speaking to? And is there a relationship there between the things that they've done outside of Google Analytics? So it's not the be all and end all, but it's a useful component part.
I guess that's one of the kind of key issues that people have, is how do they marry the online work that they do with the offline work that they do, which is obviously attending events. But there's oh, hang on, there's another question here.
Look,
from
actually, just briefly on that, that's a really important thing, and that really comes back to the principles of project management, the principles of road mapping, and principles of kind of being agile. So having a really clear picture of what you're doing in the space of your time, including the online stuff and the offline stuff. So we can really say, right, look, you know, what are you doing both offline and online, and what picture does that paint, and how do we map, you know, the value of Google Analytics data versus the value of attending the right place, talking to the right number of people, and getting a proper response.
So there's a question from Andy. Are there any overriding marketing channels or strategies that are broadly applicable, reliable, and robust in different circumstances? Either that something that will always give you a consistent bang for your buck?
So are you looking for the magic bullet, basically? That's the most common question. Yeah, look, again, my scientific training asks, you know, draws me back to what are the principles, and the principles that I promote are, you know, don't dismiss any one method as useless, because they all have their validity. but also understand that they're useful at specific times, or they're useful within specific kind of situations. So I tend to sit down with people and say, right, look, you know, as a port of call, you know, to communicate to your audience, what's the most relevant point of communication, so what's the most meaningful one to get the message across to your audience. And also, there is no one method. There's overriding principles. You know, create awareness, operate in spaces that are relevant to you and the person that you're speaking to, and use communication messaging really clearly so people understand what you're all about. And that overarching principle itself means that you're going to use, you know, maybe 3, 5, 7, 2 different methods, but it's about understanding that you need to let people know you exist. You need to be in the right spaces. You need to communicate clearly. Now, if you're on the ground and people are just around the corner from you, that might literally be a ground team that goes and speaks to people in person. If you're trying to trade internationally and you've got a very high demand product that just requires people knowing you exist, then, you know, being present online and fighting all the forces of kind of marketing spend is going to be probably what you focus on. But no, there isn't one best method. There isn't a magic bullet, but there is a combination of relevant to you specific approaches that you can take.
Well, thanks for that, Graham. I'm going to now bring in Colm Devine, saving the best for last as ever. So I'm bringing Colm from... Thanks a lot, Graham. So we're bringing Colm live from Dublin. Hopefully he's online here. And I'll stop sharing that. So Colm, are you able to share your slide? So
yep.
Colm now is going to talk from accelerated payments, the man with the money, as I say. And I'll just do it.
Yep, thanks very much. And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Colm Devine, based here in Dublin. You know, things are serious when the pubs are shut here, but we live in extraordinary times, and we'll make the best of it. I'm from a company called Accelerated Payments, and we're an individual invoice finance company with offices in Dublin, Toronto, and London. And the purpose of today's summit was obviously to provide some helpful advice on how to manage in what are unprecedented times. And the area I'd like to focus on today is obviously invoice finance. Obviously, as I said, we're facing into extremely volatile and uncertain times, the likes of which we've never encountered before and hopefully never will again. And the large-scale closures of businesses is obviously going to place massive pressure on cash flow for all companies. I don't think anyone's going to escape this at all. Unfortunately, the current business climate makes it difficult for banks to lend money to SMEs through its traditional product set. So we're going to see considerable concern from these banks that providing term loans or overdrafts or traditional products will lead to large-scale losses. Government intervention has been sought, and I think it will be forthcoming pretty promptly and on the scale we've never seen before. But unfortunately, the wheels do take time to get into motion, as was mentioned earlier on, and not all businesses will be eligible for this assistance. We've already seen a lot of companies being turned away from the likes of the CBILS stuff, so it will take a while to get that in place. But one product that does remain relatively robust in the time of economic uncertainty is invoice finance in its various forms. So I intend to give you a quick overview of these different types of invoice finance, how they work and how they suit companies at this current time. So if we start from the very start, what is invoice finance? Invoice finance where funds are advanced against unpaid invoices prior to customer payment, which is pretty self-explanatory. So it's leveraging an asset that's already there, and at this current time, I think it's one which is going to be more prevalent. Banks will not want to give out term loans or overdrafts, so this is a product that will be pushed more. So we will see this coming up a lot more. Traditionally, this form of finance involves providing the funder with security over the book debts and personal guarantees. And there are two main types, which I'll talk through. So it's discounting and factoring. So if we're looking at how invoice finance works, it allows business to unlock cash tied up in invoices, which you've already ran through. And the invoices are sold to a third party who advance funds up front for a percentage discount of the invoice. There are numerous providers out there, so I think there's over 200 in total in the UK, ranging from the large tier 1 banks right down to independent providers and companies like ourselves on the individual invoice finance side. Whether most of these are open for business remains to be seen, but we'll run through that in a bit more detail as we go on. It's known under various names, so you might have heard it as invoice discounting, invoice factoring, receivables finance, selective finance, spot factoring, etc. But in theory, they all remain the same. It's funding an invoice that is outstanding from a debtor. So the process itself is relatively straightforward, and most people will approach it the same way. So if you're looking at traditional invoice finance, it is an initial assessment of an SME, and it does usually involve an on-site audit, doing a deep dive of the business. Now, obviously, on-site audits will be not something that will be happening for the foreseeable future, so desk audits will become more common. But at the end of the day, they're still assessing the business in the same way. They want to make sure the credit quality of the client itself is robust, and they will base a decision based on the credit quality and the balance sheet of the SME rather than the debtors. They do take into account the debtor book, but it's a secondary concern in traditional invoice finance. But once you are approved and you have a facility, and the model itself is pretty straightforward. The SME provides goods or services to a customer as normal and raises invoices, so nothing changes there. And they send that invoice through to an invoice finance provider for funding, who then advance a percentage of that. So the standard would be anywhere between 70 and 90, but industry standard is usually around 80%, which is advanced up front, which obviously allows companies then to use that for the day-to-day cash flow of the business. And then depending on the type of invoice finance, either the SME or the funder carries out chasing payment, which I'll jump into shortly. And then obviously the remaining balance is paid back once the invoice settles. So moving on to the main differences. If we're looking at, sorry, it hasn't kicked on. Bear with me. The differences between invoice discounting and, sorry, bear with me, it's kicked on. Sorry, no. If we're looking at invoice discounting versus factoring, so the essential differences lies between who takes control of the sales ledger, the responsibility for collecting payments, and the level of confidentiality. So with factoring, it's actually the finance company that takes over the management of the sales ledger and the credit control process. So they do step in and manage credit control for a company, obviously at an additional fee. And most of these offerings are disclosed in nature. So your debtors would be aware that someone is actually factoring your invoices, because they will be the ones actually chasing the debts, and they will have a notification on the invoices when they go out. In this model, the SME is provided with advance funds for individual invoices. So it is tied to the specific invoices, and any adjustments to the funds received are made on a day-to-day basis. So when an invoice is settled, they tie it off against the particular invoice. The security sought in this model is standard. The finance company will look for a book debts debenture, debt purchase agreement, and a personal guarantee. And the pricing usually involves some form of annual service fee, a discount fee on all invoices funded, a bank transfer fee, and any additional refactoring fees, which may become an issue going forward. So at the moment, once an invoice goes past 90 days, a finance company will be allowed to charge additional fees for any invoices that go past that period. And obviously in the current climate, we will see a lot more invoices with longer payment terms. So this could be a potential issue, particularly in the factoring space. Then in terms of invoice discounting, it's a different model. Obviously the SME manages their own sales ledger and payments as normal. So there's no change in the day-to-day, and it is a confidential offering. So the debtors are not made aware that this is a solution that's in place. And the funds are advanced against the whole book. So if you're looking at an initial takeout or a take on by an invoice finance provider in the current market, what they'll do is assess your current debtor book, rule out any ineligible invoices, so anything over 90 days or anything with concentration risk or export debt potentially. They will then provide 80% of the balance that is left and eligible. And then any adjustments to the funds received are made on a monthly basis. So rather than small daily adjustments, what you might see is the invoice discounting can lead to larger month-end adjustments. So for anything that's gone over 90 days will then be disapproved. And again, this could lead to some issues in the current climate, because again, a lot of debts are going to roll into overdue. And securities are pretty much the same in terms of, pricing and security would be pretty similar to factoring. And then who can use invoice finance, which is a pertinent question at the moment. Before this all began, invoice finance was a model that was quite suitable for companies in business startups who had a high growth phase. There was a lot of companies out there who would assist startups, and then not so much the banks, but certainly independent providers would. And we would certainly be one of those who would assist startups, and that will remain the case going forward. And growing businesses, and so obviously this is what invoice finance is mainly designed for: a company in a high growth phase, producing invoices regularly against high quality debtors. They can on-sell those invoices to cater for their working capital requirements. But the most pertinent one at the moment will be struggling businesses. So we will see a lot more companies using invoice finance who hadn't in the past. And it will be to bridge the gap between invoicing customers and getting paid, and obviously trying to create a buffer for delayed payments, which will come. And we've seen this across the board. We've been notified by some larger corporate debtors that they're just going to delay payment, even though they're the type of companies who can do it. But because they are larger, this is something that they're able to force onto their customers. In terms of who and what sectors are suitable, mainly the ones that we're seeing and the ones that are most suitable for invoice finance are the likes of recruitment, manufacturing, wholesale, printing, transportation, and any service providers like cleaning and security. And this will remain the case. Now, a lot of these aren't able to produce invoices, which obviously creates the problem that invoice finance isn't suitable for their book going forward, or their requirements going forward. But we are seeing a lot of companies who are taking advantage of the current climate. So we're looking at the likes of recruitment. We have several customers who are now catering for the influx of additional staff required in larger retailers at the moment. So we have seen quite a surge in that type of business, and we'd expect there will be other sectors that something similar will happen. But in general, any company who is selling an invoice for goods or services that have been completed can avail of invoice finance, and it just comes down to the credit quality of the debtor you're looking at and what terms you're selling on. But the basic requirements for invoice finance are quite straightforward. Your business trades with other businesses, so it has to be B2B. It can't be B2C. You're a limited company or LLP. You offer industry standard credit terms. You've been trading for a minimum of 6 months, so there's very few companies out there who will deal with a company who's been trading for less than 6 months, particularly in the current market. And then there are some lenders who have a minimum requirement, so you have to sell a minimum number of invoices on a monthly basis. Regardless of anyone else, you do have to have a good quality debtor book. So nearly all providers do ensure that you have good quality debtors, because that's exactly how the model works. You need to make sure you're going to get paid at the end of the day. And there has to be a minimum turnover of 250,000. So you'd rarely see companies below that looking for invoice finance. It's just not a product that suits them at that stage. There is a product that kind of sits in between the two, and it's the one that we focus on, and it's called individual invoice finance, known as selective invoice finance or spot factoring as well. But it is a more flexible approach to invoice finance and allows SMEs to release cash from specific invoices when it's needed. So it is a product that allows companies to dip in and out. And in the current climate, again, we're seeing a lot of companies coming to us who do just want to dip in and use it for the current crisis. It's suitable for businesses who want to release funds against high value invoices, or those with long payment terms facing credit insurable debtors. So that's one of the key things here. It is a debtor focused credit assessment. So our model is different. We do look at a debtor rather than the creditor, than the SME, because what we're saying is once the goods or services have been delivered, the credit risk switches across to the debtor. And because most of the time you're selling to a debtor who may have a stronger balance sheet than a smaller SME, then we can leverage off that and provide funding to a greater cohort of companies. It is a pay-as-you-go model, and so it's a discount fee or service fee charged by most providers out there, and invoices funded only. There's no long-term contracts or commitment to fund invoices in general, so companies do step in and out as they need to. It's a non-recourse offering, meaning the funder takes on the risk of debtor failure, which is particularly apt in the current climate. So a lot of companies are worried about their debtors. We obviously credit insure debtors on our side. So when we buy an invoice, we're purchasing it outright, and we're the ones who are taking the risk of any debtor failure on that side, which is an added comfort blanket to any suppliers or clients out there. Some providers require additional security over the book debts or personal guarantees. We don't in our model, but ours is a disclosed offering, so we do need to verify invoices with debtors. Now, this in the past may have been a concern, but I think we're looking at a very changed environment at the moment. People are aware that things do need to be checked in greater detail, and we've never had any issues verifying invoices directly with debtors, and we deal with a large number of them already. And finally, the offer can assist SMEs selling both domestically and internationally. And then just to give a quick overview of what we do in terms of our own offering, and just in terms of what we're doing, I think it's quite a suitable product for the current time, because a lot of the companies are coming to us for the very reason that it is a debtor-focused offering, so we can assist a greater number of SMEs. We do offer a very quick credit decision, so we turn things around in 24 to 48 hours. There's no long-term contracts. It's a pay-as-you-go model, with top-class pricing, and there's no additional security or PGs required. which again is prominent at the moment. People don't really want to be pledging their houses in the current climate, and it's not something that we require because, as I said, we are taking on the invoice outright and relying on the credit quality of the debtor. The non-recourse offering with credit insurance included. It can assist both domestic and export invoices, and that's something we're particularly passionate about. We help a lot of exporters in the UK because our model is perfectly suited to looking at the credit quality of the export debtor, and if we can get a limit on those, then we are happy to assist. And finally, we can work alongside existing providers if additional funding required. Now, obviously, invoice finance isn't the only solution that is out there at the moment. So what I would recommend to anyone who is looking for finance is to talk to some of the very good brokers who are out there. We deal with a good cohort of those, and they are very worth talking to at this current time. So even if invoice finance doesn't suit your requirements at this time, we'd be very happy to introduce you to some of those who would be able to provide some more information on that. So I'll just leave it at that. And if there's any other questions, please let me know, Bhairav.
So there are no questions that come up, but actually I've got a couple of questions. So for accelerated payments, what kind of information do we need to onboard as a customer, and how long is that process, and how quickly can you get money?
Yeah, very good question. So when we're looking at this, the usual thing we assess at the outset is the debtors. So we'll usually ask for a list of debtors they would like funding against. We can assess those, decide if there's a suitable credit limit in the market with our insurers, and get back to them pretty promptly. So usually within 24 hours to say that, yes, we can assist with these debtors. So then it's just a case of actually getting set up on our platform, which is web-based. They can get set up there, put in their basic company details. We'd have them approved within 24 hours. And then it's usually a case of us trying to verify the invoice. So that's usually the process that might take slightly longer on the first turn. So once we're able to verify an invoice, we usually have funds with a company within 24 hours. So you're probably looking at less than a week if we have all the information that we need. So again, that's why it's quite suitable for the current climate.
And are there any kind of minimum limits? If you've got a smaller business, let's say, that only has maybe a couple of £1,000 of invoicing, is that something you guys will look at?
Yeah, we can look at smaller invoices, but it usually starts at around 10K upwards, but they can batch invoices together for that kind of level. And that's usually the kind of customers that we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, I guess also, in the current environment, there are certain industries you're probably staying away from. So are there any kind of areas that people would, if they're in a hospitality business, for example, are they will they struggle with you to get the funding?
Coincidentally, we wouldn't have many companies in the hospitality sector, just due to the nature of their product. So they're obviously B2C facing. So we don't come across many companies in that sector. But one that we wouldn't usually look at is construction, just due to the phase nature of that. So that'd be the one sector that we would shy away from. And then obviously, as you can imagine, aeronautical at the moment isn't one that we'll be looking at. Yeah. So other than that, now we're pretty much able to look at most sectors, depending on who the debtor is.
Okay, and if someone wanted to get in contact with you now and reach out, what's the best way? Is it?
And they can do it through LinkedIn, or I'll pop my email onto the chat forum here, and also through our website at Accelerated Payments.
Excellent. All right. Well, there aren't any other questions coming through specifically for you, so I think, and we're now going to wrap up the event. So thanks for everyone who's presented. It's been a great summit. I think it's very informative and a lot of good practical advice that have come from each of the different presenters. I will be sending out so you'll automatically get a link to the recording for this event. So you'll get that coming through, and on that email you should have contact details for everyone that's been presenting. And we will also send out the presentations separately to everyone who's attended and those who didn't manage to attend as well. So thanks for everyone. It's been great having you on board, and I hope you found this interesting. Thanks, guys.